So I had a teacher in seminary, and I took what's called an independent study, and his name was Father Gavin Barnes. He was an amazing guy. I studied theater at Northwestern. Anyway, he's a monk of St. Meinrad, where I went, and he thought that the genius of Shakespeare was the sound. And so there's a I think it's in King Lear, where King Lear's like going crazy, and he's in the storm. And at one point he says, "Blow winds and crack your cheeks." And he said, people who don't understand Shakespeare will pipe in storm noises. But he said, you don't need to do that because Shakespeare already built the storm in the speech.
Interesting.
So blow winds and crack your cheeks.
I see.
It sounds like
yeah.
And when he said it, I thought, is that real? Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so he's the one who convinced me that the genius of Shakespeare is in the sound it makes, which is it's in the text. And so I think that's why reading Shakespeare is a little bit like handing out Mozart's scores.
Interesting.
Like the sound is the genius. So I think if you want people to love Shakespeare,
you need to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the wordplay is amazing. So that's an added benefit. So it wouldn't be exactly analogous to saying it's like printing off Mozart's musical scores. But nevertheless, if you want to get into Shakespeare, I would recommend going to see it.
Do you think, have you ever done this thing where you realize that words sound like what they're conveying? Like, I don't know, but I don't know if that's true or if it's like big. Does big sound big? Does little sound little? I don't know.
Yeah, but
like,
of course, there's
like
something
bang,
like
bang.
Yeah,
sounds
so
like
that's
bang.
like an onomatopoeia, though, right? Like zing, bang, poof, cow.
Have you heard of boba and kiki?
No.
So it's a study where there's people, they're shown a circle and a square, and they say which one's boba and which one's kiki. Or it's a circle and a triangle. Which one's boba, which one's kiki? What would you say?
The circle's clearly
boba and kiki. Well, kiki would be the triangle.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. And the circle's boba.
Of course.
And none of these languages that they surveyed, it was multiple languages across like continents. None of them had a word boba or kiki, but everyone identified boba as the circle and kiki as the
Is
triangle.
it because kiki has the sharp edge sound to it?
Yes, that's right. I think that's right. And boba sounds like a round sound.
Don't you just love my
Boba.
podcast? You didn't know we were going to talk about this. I didn't know Neil knew that.
I did not
This
know
is
either.
why long form is where it's at.
Amen.
Remember like 20 years ago when you would go on EWTN and get 2 minutes?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe he did.
But then Chuck would be selling you something about like, some placard or something. Boba and kiki.
Boba and kiki.
I'm not going to forget this.
There's other words though, isn't there, that sound like what they convey?
Give me one.
I'd have to think. I was hoping you'd give me one. Lounge? No.
Okay. Lounge does feel like you're relaxing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but maybe this
Silent? No.
silent.
But then scream. If scream meant silent, maybe I'd think scream sounded silent.
Perhaps. I'm trying to think of a word that it doesn't do that and then it's confusing. So I've studied a little bit of Latin in my life. And so knowing Latin roots, that's really helpful. So when a word doesn't, I'm trying to think of a word that just doesn't make sense to me because it doesn't sound like it should, what it means, or doesn't mean what it sounds like.
Let's just start saying words. Kettle. Bath. Refrigerator.
Okay.
Whiskey. Glass. Bum. Finger.
My teacher who I was just mentioning, Gavin Barnes, he thinks the most natural sound is ah, which he said we call him God.
What?
God.
Gog?
God. Like God. The universe, the deity of the universe.
I get you. I know that guy.
So it's the most natural sound. It's like God.
Ah.
But we normally in America we say God instead of God.
Golly, I wish I had thought of this beforehand.
more
Because I'm
British.
sure that. What was that word you said? Like bang, zing, zip. What is that?
Onomatopoeia.
I never have heard of that before. See, onomatopoeia doesn't sound anything like what it's conveying. I don't even really know what it's conveying, but
Yeah, it's just kind of syllables put together for zing, pow.
it's like everything in comic books. Kapow!
Exactly. It does have that Batman kind of like punching 4 people at once.
Also, animal noises like moo, supposed to sound like a cow, but it's the word that means the sound of the cow. So,
Do you ever see that bit with Brian Regan where he's reading a child's book and the owl says hoot? No, it doesn't. Like, I've never been outside. Hoot!
Yes. Brian Regan, he's really good.
Have you seen him live?
No.
I've seen him live 3 times.
Is he good?
He's very good. And my wife saw him live before he was big, and she was on a front row, front table, at a little bar in Houston. Yeah, he's terrific. He has made me like hurt laughing.
He just has a gift. Some people are just funny.
Yeah.
And I think when you're clean, it's harder in some ways. And he's really good.
Why do you think that is? I understand the shock value of an F-bomb in a comedy stand-up routine, and maybe that's like it shocks you and it kind of wakes you into laughter in a way. But what is it about clean comedy that you think is actually...
let me rephrase that in this way. I think that you're always establishing a context for the crowd. And when you can make them laugh in a clean way, you can ride that out. So I think our friend Bob Rice, he studied comedy in his life. And I think there's a phrase, something like, when you go blue, you can't go back. So if you use like the F-bomb, you can use it once and you can get like kind of a shocking laugh.
Or tell a dirty joke up front, but then you can't.
It's almost like you can't recover from there. And I find that's generally true. Like if there are comics that I'm like, like once they kind of go there, they either stay there or keep going sort of downward.
Interesting.
Because you've now set a context like, I guess we can do that now. But if you think about the most successful comics, at least was traditionally, we're not like doing blue comedy. Like, because you want to be like family friendly. That's going to just get you the
But isn't that
largest
also
audience.
that's probably also the case that it was probably less acceptable 50 years ago to be as blue as people are today?
That's probably true.
I like Louis C.K., but I can't watch his stand-up routines because he gets so dirty.
Yes.
And just dirty's the wrong word. Just vulgar and disgusting. But when you watch him in like a late night back and forth with, say, Conan O'Brien or somebody, like his brilliance, I think, really shines forth because he can't be as foul as he is in his stand-up.
Yeah, he's very witty. He's very funny. And he's very perceptive.
Mm-hmm.
He's made perceptions about life. And I'm like, that is
Do you think that is the heart of comedy, is showing you what you thought you were the only one who experienced something? You know,
Mortimer J. Adler once defined Aristotle as having uncommon common sense. So he said common sense, but it was uncommon. He like points out things. You're like, that is true.
Yeah.
And I think comics are pointing out something that you've seen 100 times. You've read that child's book. That says hoot when that's what the owl says.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense, but you've just never noticed it. But a comedian's like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So comedians just see the world differently.
Have you done comedy before? Didn't you do like comedy sports, I thought?
No. When I was in college, I was a theater major.
Okay.
And then I applied for like our improv comedy troupe at my college. And I went to the rehearsal and it was so dirty. The rehearsal, I just walked out.
Really?
Yeah, like I wanted to justify to myself, like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
But then I thought about it rationally and I thought, no, I don't think this is good for my soul, number one. And number two, even if I make it, I don't know who I would invite. I thought, even if I make the team,
yes,
who am I going to invite? I thought I was like a youth leader on a core team, like a youth group. And I'd be like, never come. I wouldn't want to tell anyone about it because I'd be afraid they'd show up. And even if like the bits I were in were pretty clean, I knew the other ones in the special would be like R-rated. Yeah. And so I just can't do it.
Was this stand-up? Did you have a routine?
No. It's like, so they had both like sketch comedy where like SNL, but then they also had improv comedy. So it was those two groups. So I was auditioning for those.
Why do you think it is that women can be very funny, but not as stand-ups? When did you stop beating your wife?
I actually don't think that's true.
You don't name one funny female stand-up comic.
Well, first of all, let me just say, you mentioned this before.
Name one funny.
Yeah, I think Taylor Tomlinson is funny.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, well, there you go. But I think I hate sexual humor, like vulgar humor. I don't think it's funny, and I find it like in my gut. I'm like, ugh, I hate this, and I hate the fact.
Why do you hate it? Do you think it's
female comedians very often have vulgar sexual humor?
Let me tell you my thought on the subject, and then I'm happy to be corrected. I'll listen to this lady. Maybe she's brilliant. I'm not trying to not find females. It's not like this is a doctrine I have to submit to. I'm okay finding a woman who's hilarious. So here's a couple of women who I find are hilarious in TV. That Sheila from Parks and Rec. What's her name? The main one, you know?
Don't know.
Okay, well, she is outrageously hilarious.
Yes.
Lucille Ball is also really, really funny.
Amy Poehler.
Yeah, she's terrific, you know? Like, women are hilarious. Laura Horn, Trent Horn's wife, probably the funniest woman I've ever met in my life. Like, one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. My wife is uncommonly hilarious, especially in the morning when she doesn't have her wits about her. She just starts saying these really witty, hilarious things. But I think that the reason I think that men are funnier than women in stand-up, and perhaps generally speaking, are better presenters, like solo presenters. There are obviously excellent presenters. I'm thinking of Sister Miriam James, Heidland, and others. I think it's the authority thing. I think men have an authority that women don't when they speak. So that when I find that women are on stage, they either, and this is not always the case, but with female comics especially, they come off like really hard and dirty, or they're sheepish, and that doesn't make it either. So I feel like they've got to kind of assert themselves in an aggressive way to try to meet the level of authority that men naturally have from stage. And that's why I think a lot of women get real dirty real quick.
So you think women are funny in real life?
Yep.
You think women are funny?
Not as funny as men.
You think women are funny in playing characters?
They can be, but usually but still not as funny as men.
And in your life, you would say zero. You've never seen a female stand-up comic that you thought was funny.
That's correct.
Okay.
But I'm happy to be proven wrong, and I'd love to check that woman out because I'd love to stop saying that. I'm not trying to be a jerk. You understand? I'm just saying what appears to me to be the case.
Yeah, and I she gets dirty, so I would just
does she?
Full disclosure.
Yeah,
and that drives me crazy. But she's clearly witty, and she makes cultural references that sometimes I'm like, how did you pull that out?
But if you surveyed 1,000 people and said, who's your favorite comic? 99% would say men. And that's not just because the majority of men are stand-up comics. I mean, it might be, but there's a reason 99% of men are stand-up comics, and they're funnier than women naturally, I think.
Yeah, I've never thought about that. Yeah, I mean, I think the narrative around comedy is that it's really hard to be a woman in comedy. That's what comedians say. Yeah. But I've never been in that scene.
Can you think of a very funny woman? I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot. I'm not trying. I know it sounds like I'm just being a huge jerk at this point.
No, not off the top of my head.
But it's important to say what seems to be the case, isn't it? I'm trying to find that balance in life. Somebody wrote to me the other day over text message, and they said, "Hey, my friend moved to Uganda. He's helping the orphans and the poor. He's established these wells. He'll be in Steubenville. Could he be on your show? He'd love to promote your thing." And I went, "I don't want to interview him." And that's how I said it. Like, I'm not interested.
Yes.
Because I wasn't interested.
Yes.
And I'm not great at threading the needle of, thank you so much. At this point, I feel like there's a lot going on. So maybe but that's not true. Like, I'm not interested in having that conversation. If I knew the guy and he was a really good conversationalist, I'd be happy to talk about that.
Yes. I'm glad you like that. I actually really appreciate it. I know I've told you this before. I think for me, when I listen to Jordan Peterson and he talks about people who are naturally agreeable and naturally disagreeable, I'm naturally very agreeable.
I think I am.
Agreeable or disagreeable?
Agreeable.
Okay.
You don't think so?
I'm not saying that. I'm naturally very agreeable, so I don't love conflict and I don't love disagreeing. So I actually really appreciate it when people are like, yeah, I don't want to do that.
Well, what's funny is maybe I don't seem super agreeable, but the times I've interviewed Matt Walsh, you know who that is from Daily Wake? Whenever I'm around Matt Walsh, I just feel like I'm way too enthusiastic. and while I'm chatting with him, I'm like, I don't think I'm usually perceived this way, but he's just so dour.
Yeah, and I've seen him recently get asked about his courage, and he did say, I'm mildly courageous, and like I grew up, I'm come from a devout Catholic conservative family, and went to public schools. We had to learn how to defend our faith. But he also said, I'm naturally very contrarian, and I do kind of like trolling people. So he does recognize he does have the kind of personality
I like
that
it
kind
a little
of
bit.
loves conflict.
I like it a little bit.
Okay.
I would like people in the comments, let me know who your funniest female stand-up comedian is.
Yeah.
I do want to
I wish I had one that was like clean, but I
don't know any female comedians off the top of my head. I think there's I have like funny female friends.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
But they're still not as funny as your male friends.
I also have to qualify what I said by saying I don't find comedians that funny. I know that's probably sounds like a pretentious thing to say, but it's pretty rare that I watch a comedian and I laugh out loud. Yeah. I love hearing other people laugh. I love the sound of laughter. This is why the
soundtracks really help. Have you ever watched Friends clips on YouTube without the soundtrack?
Oh no, is it just...
They have a whole series of these on YouTube and you're like, wow, you're right, this isn't funny. Yes. There's something about that laughter that gets you laughing.
So I love watching comedy because I love hearing people laugh, even if I'm not laughing out loud. So, and I think it's clever. So anyway.
Who is, who I laughed at a lot? Ricky Gervais is an excellent comedian. He's also an atheist, and I object to many, many things that he says. And I often wouldn't go along with those who would say, look how courageous he is for speaking out against the trans insanity, because he does, but then he kind of like walks it back and says, hey, you do you, live your own life. And I'm like, all right, well, either it's insane or it's not insane. And if it is insane, you shouldn't be telling people to live their own insanity.
From my understanding, though, he still kind of held the line. Because I thought he said, like, they're just like everyone else, which is why I can make fun of them like everyone else. Like, I feel like he is.
He is. You're right. He's more courageous than most. But the first 15 minutes of his Netflix latest stand-up thing was golden. And then it just dropped off and I wasn't that impressed. And I'm not necessarily encouraging people to watch it because there is a lot of really inappropriate and sexual things in there. But golly, he's funny. And I laughed out loud, found myself laughing out loud. Him, Brian Regan, Norm MacDonald. My gosh, that guy can get super gross. Unfortunately, it's really unfortunate because he's so lovely. Like, he's so adorable in a way. I mean that in a non-patronizing way. Like, he's like your everyman guy. Like, he acts like a bit of a dunce, and he's just charming. So it's like you've got this, oh, you're so charming, and then you start speaking sexually, and you're like, ugh, I don't want someone I perceive to be charming. And
yeah, the comedy's so specific because I just cannot get in Norm MacDonald.
Yeah.
And he died recently, and I've been seeing commentary about him, and people are like, a lot of people think he's the best.
I think he probably is, yeah.
Wow.
But Brian Regan is just spectacular.
I kind of love Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
Do you know when you just see somebody and you don't know why? I kind of just love that person.
Yeah.
And I would love to meet him. I loved Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Christopher Hitchens, he wrote that article called Why Women Aren't Funny.
He did.
Yeah, and he said it was because of evolutionary reasons. He's like, you have no need to be funny. Look at us. It's really important. And that's so true. Like, I think if a woman finds a man and finds him hilarious, she probably finds him attractive. Yes. But I don't need to find my wife, like, hilarious to find her attractive. She has many other traits, and...
Is he arguing basically that women are beautiful? So that may
really I haven't read the article, honestly. I just heard about it because I started saying this and someone referenced Christopher Hitchens as having written an article on it. I haven't read it.
Here's a question. What makes people interesting?
I find you very interesting.
Wow. Well, I didn't mean to be. What makes people narcissistic? Because I want to ask the question.
I don't know what narcissistic means. I know that people keep using the term a lot lately.
Yes.
So we can get into what narcissism means. What is interesting? If someone's interesting. I find people who are interesting.
Okay.
So like you just spent the last 20 minutes asking Neil all about his life. And you were actually interested. And I just thought, what a wonderful human being who's not so concentrated on his own interior world and his comfort and needs. Like, that's interesting to me. Like, you're outward. I like that in people.
So G.K. Chesterton once said, my favorite author, there are no uninteresting subjects, only uninterested people. So everything is interesting. Everything's wonderful. Everything is, but we're just, for whatever reason, we've conditioned ourselves in such a way to not think it's interesting. I think you might be onto something there. Because when people's world becomes kind of narrow, they become less interesting.
I often think my children are trying to remind me how to be human. Peter ran up to me after Mass the other day and he went, Dad, did you know you could cut your tongue with a single blade of grass? I just did it.
Did he say that?
That's exactly what he said. And I just thought, you are a wonderful human being. You are in awe of all that's around you. You're interesting.
Yeah. Kids think...
Because you're interested. If you're not interested, then... yeah, you're right. Your whole personality has become truncated and narrow.
Chesterton says something like, adults need to read fairy tales because they need to know, like, when the door opens, there's a dragon behind it. But he said a kid is riveted the fact that the door opens. There's such a thing as a door and that it opens. I have this, my sister Laura, her oldest son's named Hayden. And one day, she was telling him, oh, be careful around the outlet, it's dangerous. And he looked at it and he goes, Mommy, that's not an outlet, that's an inlet. I was like,
that's wonderful.
That is an inlet. Why do we call it an outlet? That's genius. And he was like so perturbed by what she was saying. Like, Mommy, what? So yeah, it's pretty fun. Reason number 1,312 not to look at pornography is that it makes you boring.
Why?
Well, I just like, what is looking at the naked bodies of people and objectifying them, how does that make you interesting? How does that expand you in any way?
Well, I think to our point, if we're agreeing maybe that the more interested you are, the more interesting you're likely to be, I think pornography makes you interested in a very narrow thing and it blinds you to the entire rest of reality in a way.
I love what you're saying.
Like, I can't even look at a woman and perceive her to be my sister. All I perceive her as this sexual thing. And so it's like my brain is shut down and I'm unable to perceive the whole rest of the picture. Not just in women, but in life. Everything becomes sexual. All my jokes become sexual. I constantly say things like, that's what she said, and we all kind of snicker. And
oh, I love what you're saying so much. So I have a priest friend, and he was telling me about the difference between an idol and an icon. And what makes an idol is it's exhausted the moment you look at it. Like, there's no mystery to it. So like a pornography is an idol, as John Paul II famously said. I'm not seeing too much of the person, but too little. And an icon, like the ultimate sign would be the Eucharist. I can see the Eucharist and it just looks like a wafer to me, but I cannot exhaust it. I could stare at it for an hour. I could stare at it for 100 years and I don't exhaust it. So that's
Dude,
the difference.
That's
Isn't
my
that
wife.
wild?
That's my wife. That's how I feel about my wife. I was sitting in my chair. I brought coffee up to her this morning. She's not feeling well. So she has difficulty getting down the stairs. So I brought a coffee to her and I sat in my chair and she just started speaking to me. And I was like, I know this might sound like I'm saying this to sound like a good husband.
Yes.
And maybe I am, but it's still the case, what I'm about to say. I was so struck by her. I just thought, who are you? Like, I've been living with you for 15, 16 years. I don't have a clue. Like, you are so much deeper and more mysterious than I had thought.
That's amazing.
Everything must be like that.
That's amazing.
But we're just uninteresting.
Did you tell her that?
You know what? She was gently correcting me on something. I think my wife's a saint, actually. She struggles with an incredible amount of pain, and she never complains. She's just offering it to our Lord, and constantly. And she was gently telling me, because I have not been great through her suffering. I wish I could be like, I was the strong, silent type who just stood back. But I've just been moaning and upset and like hopeless about the future of like, what does this mean? And you've been sick for so long. And she's just so lovingly saying like, what do you think our Lord is trying to, I think he's trying to teach you something through this, but not in an overbearing, awful, thinly pietistic sort of way, but in a real substantial way. And when you see someone carrying their suffering well, that's a person to listen to. If they're not, then maybe there's just spitting cliches. But if they can live suffering well, like my wife does, all of a sudden be like, okay, like, whoa. Like imagine if you could go back in time through a time machine and hang out with like Teresa of Avila. Wouldn't you be like hanging on her every word? That's kind of what I felt like this morning. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm living with a saint. And I was just like captivated by all that she said. Yeah. Now, I might forget that this afternoon and be, I probably will.
Yes. How did you get there? How does a man come to the point where his wife, after you've been married for 16 years, can come in and sit down and talk to him? And as he's listening to her, he looks at her and thinks...
Well, it's very rare that happens. I mean, most of the time I don't even look at her. That's what's crazy. Sometimes when you look at someone and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at you at all. Like for the last 2 days, I've been hanging out with you, but I haven't looked at you.
Yes.
So most of my life is not looking at people around me.
Well, let's just bracket that. Right. I just want to honor the fact, though, that it did happen after 16 years of marriage.
Yeah, man.
What would be the ingredients as to how that happened? Any idea?
It's nothing of my own merit. I think I'm just like, I'm like trying to love my wife, and I'm just so desperately aware of the fact that I do not have the fuel to get there. I don't have it. It's not a matter of just a try. And I just like, there's nothing in the tank. It's like telling me, just fly. I'm like, I really, really can't.
Yes.
And that's what it's felt like for so long. And so last night in adoration, that language of John 3:30, he must grow greater, I must grow less, became so real to me in that like, not just he must grow greater in like emphasis, but like in me, you need to grow greater. And me, like fuelless, empty, wretched me, it can't do the things you're requiring of me. So you're going to have to. So it's something about like wrestling with that and then just seeing her in her selflessness and her, outwardness. She gives of herself to people all the time. Like she won't mind me telling this. I know people might think, aren't I sharing something she wouldn't want to share? That's not the case. She has her own podcast. She's open about this, right? But she knelt for communion recently and dislocated her knee because of her chronic pain stuff, right? Like, man, if I dislocated my knee, I would be like, I need to go to the Bahamas for 5 months and recoup,
Yes.
She just popped it back in and went and held somebody's baby for them. Like, she's just good. So I don't know what it was. It was just our Lord gave me the grace and I saw her. And I'm just like, it is good.
That is a grace.
Very good.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think women are beautiful. And if I had to use a word, I want to see if you agree with this. That when a woman is beautiful, feminine, modest, believes in her own mystery, that's the only way I can say it. I know that sounds esoteric, but if a woman believes in her own mystery of the feminine genius, I think the best word to describe women like that is captivating. Like I feel there's something about them. They just sort of draw me in, and their femininity activates my masculinity in a way that I just find it captivating. Like I want to be a better man. Like I want to provide, I want to protect, I want to be present. Like as a priest, and as a priest, this is kind of when you're celibate.
I was about to ask that.
It's kind of like I feel like femininity, like the Platonic form. Like there's this, like the idea that there's femininity is perfection, the ideal or the form of femininity. You just see women at all the different stages of your life. Now that I'm 40, I have like grade school kids, see like a 5-year-old little girl, and then you see like them going through puberty, like adolescence, and you see high school and college and whatever, middle age, older. And so I feel like I have an appreciation of the beauty of women across the whole spectrum of, I know you have to love people in individual cases. You can't love humanity in general, but you get what I'm trying to say? I feel like what I'm saying is a little inchoate, but
you are saying that.
So the first point, that captivating, like, would you say that Cameron was captivating? Like, who are you?
Give us another word for captivating. I feel that word has been so overused that maybe I don't hear it anymore.
It's just drawing you in. It's just like pulling you in.
Yeah, I do. I mean,
it's like a divine undertow.
This is just probably a superficial way of thinking of it, but I heard some point at, that advertisements with women on them will have people stare at those advertisements for like 3 or 4 times longer. I forget the exact number, right? So there's that just beauty, like a physical beauty that captivates us. But you're talking about something that and much more.
Yes, it must be more, because
I see that in Kimberly Hahn. Kimberly Hahn is captivating to me. I'm just like, who are you? Like, I know you're powerful. I know you're good.
Yes. Yeah. That's captivating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a power. Women have a power that I think feminism gone awry seeks to rob them of in a way.
Yes.
But women are powerful. And by powerful, I mean what Peterson means when he talks about power. I mean competent. Not like bull busting. Not that. I think men are afraid of powerful women because they think it means emasculating, but that's not what it means. So that's not how we mean it.
Yeah, and of course, I think feminism goes wrong. If by feminism we mean equal rights for women, which it means all sorts of things, but it's either competitive towards men or it's comparative towards men. Well, I think a woman who's embracing her feminine genius doesn't feel like she's in competition with men or that she needs to therefore attack them or that. And so therefore there's a freedom to just be a woman. And that's very captivating. It's very beautiful.
What is it like being sexually attracted to a woman as a priest?
Well, it's...
I presume you have been at one point in your priesthood.
Yes. Yeah, so that never goes away. So it's mysterious. Well, first of all, let me just say, I think celibacy is a miracle.
Like marriage.
Exactly right. That's
not humanly possible.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
So I think celibacy is a miracle. I've said that to my parish, and they're like, I'm like, I don't know how anybody does it. I don't know how anybody does celibacy, honestly. Like, how does somebody stay celibate their whole life? I think it's a miracle. But I also think marriage is a miracle. Like, to be with one person your whole life, to get old together, I think that's a miracle. I think it's supernatural. It's not natural. So I'd have to say all of that. So that doesn't mean there's not a struggle and that's legitimate and real. But yeah, it's constantly just bringing it to the Lord and help me, and trying to recognize the beauty. Like, that's a beautiful woman and I'm drawn to her. And
acknowledging that is so helpful, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Even as a married man, right? I encounter women who I find myself sexually attracted to, and just acknowledging that, like, thank you for this beautiful person.
Yes. And that's so good. And then I've been recently reading Theology of the Body in plain language, and just the desire to have like a deeper purity of heart. So however way I've been able to see her with a purity of heart, that there's always more, and I could see like more of women.
If I had to this icon idol thing.
Yes, if I just like even just a little more purity of heart, I could see her even deeper.
Oof.
And that
blessed are the pure in heart.
There'd be a sense of there's even more inexhaustible mystery that I can't encounter, and that's captivating because it's drawing me in. Of like,
right, like blessed are the pure in heart; they shall see
God.
The mystery, like the incomprehensible being. Yeah.
I was like, should we pray? And you're like, yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and this is why sin makes us boring. That's not just a cliche of like repressed frigids who think they have to not have sex or masturbate so God will like them more. Like, it's actually true that sin makes you boring and pornography makes you boring.
Yeah, if we could come full circle, at the very beginning I asked you what makes somebody interesting? And you said, I think one of the things is that they're interested in other people. So it's a kind of paradox. Like, if you want people to be interested and want to look at you, then get interested in looking at other people. Don't look at yourself. But what is sin? Well, as St. Augustine once said, it's curvatus in se, incurvatus se, to curve in on oneself.
Yeah.
And I love the image on Dante's Inferno of the devil. And he has, three faces, three mouths, and three sets of eyes, and he's crying from all of them, and he's gnawing on these three traitors for all of eternity. And he's
Stuck in ice.
There's ice up to his chest, and which he's causing from his own wings, and he's trapped, and he's sad.
Dude,
and
I know what that feels like.
Me too.
Have you ever had that experience where you felt sad and attacked and stuck, and you want to be?
Ooh,
that sucks. I've had that.
Want to be?
Yeah. So it's almost like I'm aware that I could renounce this and choose joy, but I don't want to. I want to stay stuck in it.
Sin is so mysterious.
It's gross. You not had that?
I don't know. I mean, I definitely have had the feeling where
it's sort of like a child who wishes to pout and sit in the corner instead of being invited back to the party. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's what I've experienced and still experience at times.
Like the bitter freedom.
Yeah, almost like my way of having control over others or control over God, which is absurd.
Yeah, you're reminding me of like the bitter fruit of unforgiveness. Like
Yeah.
I could forgive, but it's so delicious to hold on to.
That's right.
The hurt,
something
the
like
resentment.
that. Something like that.
I definitely had the feeling of doing something and I hated the fact that I was doing it and I wish I could stop doing it. And
Saint Paul.
so that's, I want out of this prison.
St. Paul, right? I do the things I don't want to do. Things I don't want to do, I keep doing. Who will
Romans
save
7.
me from this body of death? Is that what he says? Body of death?
Yes. And I've given people for confession for their penance, Romans chapter 8, verse 1, which is the next line, which is there is therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. There is therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. I mean, come on. None. That's what he says. None. I mean,
a little bit? No.
I love being Catholic. I love being Catholic.
Why?
It's the best.
Oh, okay.
Just splice that. It's like 8 seconds. Why you should be Catholic.
You make it happen, Neil.
Why? It's the best. Cliches. Okay. Confession. I don't know how people live without confession. I'm being totally honest with you. Like if I had to be honest with you, I would think I would just have terrible self-knowledge or I would be on prescription drugs. I'm just being honest. Like I have done terrible things and I know it. And I'm sad about the man I was before I knew the Lord. And I'm really sad about the things I've done since I've known the Lord, which is so much worse, as you know. Like when you know Jesus, you've tasted the sweetness of his love and you've still betrayed him. That is like an exquisite pain, right? So I don't know how people live without confession. I just don't know how you do it. So that alone would be like magnificent.
It's almost like if confession didn't exist, we'd have to invent it.
Yes.
Like I need to go and tell somebody these things that I've done.
And I think that happens. There was something, I want to say it was Madonna. She had like the confession tour where people could call in and just say things they had done that they never told anybody. And like thousands of people did it. It could be somebody else, but it was this idea. It was like a hotline. You could just call in and just say what you wanted. Yeah. Apparently before like, IDs on your phones, you see who it was. Yeah. And tons of people did it. I also think taxi cab drivers, I've heard a lot of confessions. Uber and Lyft's a little different because you have like the person's face, But I think taxi, like I'm never going to see this person again. Wow. And I think people just sometimes like, hey, I've never told anybody this before, but because I just need to tell somebody, Yeah. There's a movie that I really like and I want you to see it.
What's it called?
So this is the problem. One of the problems of being a priest in movies, especially like when you're preaching, is anytime you mention a movie,
I know
you feel like you're condoning everything about the movie and you're saying like, oh, the Catholic Church condones.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can recommend the Bible without condoning the execution of the God-man.
Yeah.
Right, that's the worst thing that ever happened, actually.
Yes. So it has kind of two men kiss in one scene, and then there's like a quick like 5-second kind of a man's bare behind with so just full disclosure that this is not. The movie's called The Forgiven.
Okay.
And I saw this movie and it just like, it's for adults, to be clear. And it like stayed with me for a while. And I've discovered from my friends that I'm kind of a pretty tough critic, which I don't think with movies. I just want to see good movies. And I think a lot of them are pretty terrible. But I remember just being haunted by this movie. I would like you to see it.
How old is it? Who's in it?
It's very recent. It's probably come out in the last year, maybe 2 years. It has, I think, Ralph Fiennes.
I don't know any actors. I don't know why Chastain. I ask. There's people who know all the actors.
Yes.
My son's like that. He knows all their names. I'm like, I don't know anybody. I know who Bruce Willis is. I know who Tom Cruise is. Yeah,
The big ones.
I won't get into this because I've gone into it in a different show, but I watched a show called Old, a movie called Old by M. Night Shyamalan.
Yes.
And it broke me. I was on an airplane sobbing, and the Lord was ministering to my heart. I would recommend that.
I've seen
It's
most
horrific.
of it. What broke you about it?
The woman in the cave. Did you see that?
What happens?
Okay.
Spoiler alert.
I'm sorry, Neil, you have to hear this again. Well, I mean, what's so beautiful about it, right, is there's this woman who takes great pride in her appearance and in being hot. You know, that's probably how she would phrase it. She's flirtatious. She wears immodest clothing, and she's getting old, right? Who am I now? Who am I now? And she believes herself to be ugly, and so she buries herself into this, you've seen it, into the cliff, or not in the cliff, but in this cave on a beach, and they try to get her to come out. But she's like, don't look at me. Don't look at me. She ends up killing herself. It's horrific. It's horrific. But that broke me apart. And I don't like movies. I get bored really easily in movies. It takes a lot to captivate me. I've bought several movies on Amazon and have watched the first 10 minutes. And then I'm just over it. But I like the idea of a movie and wanting to like a movie. But anyway. Did you watch that particular bit that I'm talking about?
Well, I'm like you in that way, so it's kind of like half watching the movie and how you're like doing other things as you're watching movies because you're. Like,
I watched The Big Short. I thought that was excellent.
Never seen it.
About the housing market crash back in 2008 or something, and then I watched Argo with
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck. I like movies with a lot of rhetorically vigorous dialogue. I like a lot of dialogue. That captivates me. That's why I like this. Like I could watch a 3-hour conversation that was honest, but I can't watch explosions and car chases and bikinis. It bores me.
Yes. What do you think is the most Catholic, non-Catholic film?
Well, maybe Les Miserables. Is that what it's called?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly. Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I've asked a fair amount of people this question. For me, a movie that came out recently was A Quiet Place.
Exodus 90. You've heard of them, haven't you, Neil?
I have.
Well, the guys behind Exodus 90 have started Exodus 21. They're calling it a 21-day restart. So for 21 days, you, along with the friends you invite, pray and read through the first 2 chapters of Corinthians while practicing disciplines such as 20 minutes of prayer every day, abstaining from unnecessary screen time, that doesn't include Pints with Aquinas, obviously, abstaining from meat on Fridays, and fasting until 4 p.m. on each weekday. You can take this shorter opportunity to introduce your brothers, cousins, co-workers, fellow parishioners, and even your neighbors. It'd be kind of weird if you didn't know them. Just assume they're Catholic and want to torture themselves for 21 days on how to live like Christ and prepare them for Exodus 90 in January. So check it out. Go to exodus90.com/Matt, exodus90.com/Matt to get started. I did Exodus 90 once and I lived like a boss monster for the first 31 days and then failed miserably. So Exodus 21 sounds super
You
doable.
would have done great at this, yeah.
I would have crushed it, although probably because 21 days was the goal, I would have like faded out around the 11th day. I don't know. Exodus90.com/Matt. Go check them out to get started. People who have done it just says it really rejuvenates their prayer life and helps them. Exodus90.com/Matt. Link is in the description. Click it and check them out.
And that starts January?
You can start whenever.
Oh.
So Exodus 90 is going to be starting in January. So this 21 day can be like a little test.
I see.
But honestly, for me, I just do the 21 days. So you can do it whenever you want. Go check it out right now, exodus90.com/Matt. It's a great way to grow in friendship, too, with people in your community. Check them out. Also want to say thank you to Hallow. Sorry. Hallow is a really great prayer and meditation app. It is just phenomenal. Whenever I talk about Hallow, I'm always impressed that a Catholic group has been able to create one of the greatest apps in the history and catalog of current apps. It has sleep stories. It allows you to pray the rosary. It even has Mark Wahlberg praying the rosary. So you can pray with Mark Wahlberg, which is pretty cool. I just got back from a trip to Africa and I'm really bad at sleeping on airplanes. So I listened to sleep stories and people read the Bible to you and stuff like that. It's really, really good. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. And also, when you sign up on the website, you get 3 months for free. So if you just download the app and sign up that way, you got to start paying monthly. But you can try it for 3 months. That's a long time. And you can see if you like it. And if you don't, you can cancel and you won't be charged a cent. Hallow.com/Matt Fradd. Finally, I want to say a massive thanks to everybody who's beginning to support us on Locals. Locals is a free speech platform that will enable me to continue putting out content long after YouTube may choose to ban us or suspend us, as Twitter did recently. So go to mattfradd.com/locals, right?
Link is in the description.
Link is in the description. And follow us there. We have morning podcasts. You get access to monthly spiritual direction with Father Gregory Pine. We release monthly audio books. For the month of August, we're going to be releasing, what's it called? Teresa of Avila's...
The Interior Castle.
Interior Castle.
Yep.
We just commissioned a study on the 5 ways of Thomas Aquinas by Dr. Ed Fazer. Hard man to get a hold of, but he has recorded the videos. They're fantastic. So just go support us there. And one more thing that we're doing is we've put together an ink on paper newsletter. It's phenomenal. I'm not joking. Isn't it? You saw it? Are you actually impressed?
No, I really like it. Yeah.
It would be awkward if you said
no. It's got a crossword too.
It's got a Catholic crossword puzzle and poetry and articles from theologians. And this will, when you get this, for free, by the way, we even pay shipping. So if you live in Namibia or Yemen or Australia, China, wherever, we ship it to you for free whenever these newsletters come out. And you can put your phone in a drawer or set it on fire, sit out on the back porch with a whiskey or coffee and just unplug. And just go to mattfradd.locals.com and join us over there.
And that's not extra. You just sign up for the local support.
Yeah.
And then
so what you got to do is once you sign up as an annual local supporter, that's how you get the thing. You can support us monthly, but if you support us annually, you get access to this newsletter. And we just ask that you put your address in. So once you sign up to Locals, there's something pinned to the top. Click through that, put in your address, and we'll just start sending them to you. Check it out, mattfradd.locals.com. Also, you don't actually have to pay to watch a lot of the content that we put out over on Locals. So download our Locals app. It's on iOS and Android. And start following us over there because it's an amazing community of Catholics all around the world that are supporting each other. It's not just me posting, it's also the supporters posting. I think people will really, really dig it. So mattfradd.locals.com. Check it out. Thank you very much. Final word, it'd be great if you subscribed. It'd be great if you then rang that bell button because right now we have a 100,000 trophy over here. We're over 250,000, which sounds more than 250,000, which is why I phrase it that way. And once we get 1 million subscribers, they will give us another plaque, at which point I will quit the YouTube channel, sell my house, and go live in the forest somewhere.
And read newspapers, ink on paper newspapers.
Yeah, and just read all of the newspapers that I've put together. Thanks so much.
A Quiet Place. I don't know if you've seen it.
A Quiet Place, yeah.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
I think it's just the gospel.
It's so excellent.
I think it's just the gospel.
Well, there's an example of a strong woman.
Oh, unbelievable.
Right?
She's
And a strong man.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And he said that. John Krasinski, he said that the movie for him was not a horror film. It was about what you would be willing to do for your family.
Yeah.
That's what the movie was really about. But I mean, it's just like self-gift from the father. Remember the scene where she goes down? I mean, she just doubts her father's love when he's like, Dad told us to stay here. And she says to him, he's coming back for you. He's not coming back for me. He's coming back for you. Like when Jesus says, I will not leave you orphans. And then when she goes downstairs and she sees like all of the cameras that he did to protect her, he sees all of the...
the hearing aids he was
the
working
hearing
on.
aids, like everything he did for her. Like, I protect you, I love you. And she didn't know any of it. She doubted all of it. And then, of course, at the end, he gives his life. Spoiler alert. Sorry if you haven't seen it. But just the whole thing. It's like, I was like, that was just the gospel. When that movie ended, I turned to my brother Matt and I said, that's the best movie I've seen in 5 years. Like the time it was over. And then a lot of people think it's Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen that. But that was a good movie.
But he's a fairly Christological figure. The main character.
What do you do on a day off? If you could be selfish about your time. I don't mean selfish. I just mean if you could recoup and just have some self-care, as they say. What do you do on a day off?
Yeah, so I want to do some praying. And then I want to exercise a little bit. And then my thing is I go down to a coffee shop. I don't drink coffee, but I love coffee shops. And there's a cafe I found. It's downtown. It doesn't have a lot of sound, and it has a lot of natural light, so a ton of glass. And I'll bring like 7 books with me. I'll bring a backpack full of books. And then I'll just spend like 3 hours there. I'll eat stuff. I'll drink a lot of green tea, iced green tea. And I will read from I don't know what I want to read until I sit down. And I'm one of those people who's always reading like 5 books at once. And I'll just read from like 3 or 4 books.
Did you take me to this place? I think when I was with you.
Probably not. It's kind of new in my life. And then sometimes I'll do island hopping. Like I will go to a coffee shop. I'll read for 2 hours. and then I'll get up and I'll drive to another coffee shop. And the information is like mulling around in my brain. I might call my sister Cindy or like a priest friend, and then I'll just go to the next place and sit down and read some more. So I just like to hear. I like having new ideas in my brain. So I like reading.
Good. And do you find? I think a lot of people don't read. They've like podcasts have replaced reading, or YouTube videos have replaced reading. But for you, you still.
I love paper, and I'm a visual learner. So like if I read something in a text,
I'm like that. I can't do Audible.
And I read incredibly slowly.
Dude.
And I finally figured out why.
Why?
It took me years. So I have a priest friend. His name's Father Boulding. He's quite smart. And one day we were talking, and I was asking him some historical question. He reads history a lot. And he's like, I don't really know. He's like, I have kind of a general outline of that. And he reads a lot of history. He said, but I just read history for fun. I don't read it to teach it. And when he said that sentence, something crystallized in my brain.
I read it for fun, not to teach it. That
sentence, because I read everything as if I were going to teach it. I don't know, it's because I taught high school for 4 years as a priest. Everything I read, I didn't know I do this. I put it down, like, how would I describe this to a junior in high school? Because I had to do that for a long time. And so that's why I read so unbelievably slow.
I see.
It's because I don't want to just have said like I read it. It's like, how would I be able to explain this to another person?
That's why you're such a good homilist. Like, you are a teacher.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, you want to digest it. Yeah, I read.
Do you read slowly?
It depends. I guess. Yeah, I do read slowly. Sometimes I have to give myself permission to miss things.
Yes. I can't. I wish I could do that.
But when I say that, I'm talking about like really bad sci-fi novels.
Okay.
Yeah, not like Aquinas or Dostoevsky.
Because sometimes you hit something like in the Theology of the Body or the Summa, and you're like, I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then sometimes if you keep reading,
that's such a wonderful thing to say out loud and just to acknowledge. I wonder if sometimes we're just afraid to admit we don't know things and we just rush past it because we're afraid of our own incompetence. But sometimes when you just stop and go, I don't know what this means, that's a really good thing to...
Mortimer J. Adler, who's one of my heroes in the intellectual life, he said to grow in intellect, you should always be reading things a little bit above you. And I've also learned, I'll say something from... The owls is hoot. And then I also find that really endearing about Jordan Peterson.
Yeah?
Yeah, I just feel like he'll say things like, I've been thinking about that for a long time. And and he'll just tell you like when I don't know what to think about that. I've been thinking about that for a long time and
I don't know.
Here's where I'm at. But it's just two. But you're like that. I feel like you were just telling me about a debate that happened and you're like, I'm not really sure if I understand what either guy was saying.
For those at home, the Jacob Imam Trent Horn debate. It's like, like Scott Hahn came up to me at the conference. He's like, what did you think? And I'm like, I don't know.
And you were there?
Yeah. And I don't say I don't know in a profound way. Like, oh, wow, you must be thinking this at a deep level. Like, no. I don't know what the words they were saying meant. Like what the speculation. And I'm like, I don't know what, I guess I got to go back and listen to it.
Yes.
It's a scary thing when you encounter two people you deeply respect for their intellect going at it. Both of them think they're 100% right, and you would love to side with either of them because you respect both of them almost equally, maybe, and not really know what to do because you don't understand it.
Yeah, I think that's intellectual humility is an important thing, and one thing that's helped me in my life is I think I'm just like anyone else. I could be given to maybe thinking I'm smarter than him. I don't, that's actually not something I struggle with too much because I did terrible at school growing up. So that sort of plants the idea that you're not. Anyway, I went to seminary at St. Meinrad, and so it's in a town of 800 people. And I just met monks who were brilliant, so well-rounded, like a scripture scholar, knows 8 languages, lives in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's going to know who they are. And they just, you'd be eating lunch with them. And that's very humbling. When you meet somebody whose intellect far outstrip yours and they're more humble than you are, that's very convicting. Because when you get to seminary, there's like a real excitement about like, I'm going to learn things. I'm going to learn Greek and I'm going to learn all these amazing things. And I remember the rector of my seminary gave a conference, and it was actually amazing. And his first conference was on Mary as a theologian. How like Mary was the greatest theologian, this teenage Jewish girl. She pondered all these things in her heart, as the scriptures say. And so he had a line in there, something like, so if in your study of theology, it doesn't make you more loving, more service-oriented, more humble, then you're not studying the God who is love. And it was like...
This is getting back. We're going full circle to interesting again. Because I'm like that way about Scott Hahn, you know. I don't care. I love him and I don't care who knows it. I just love that man, and I see his humility. Like, I brought Cameron Bertuzzi, who I've had on the show before, runs a Protestant YouTube channel, okay? I brought him over to his house, and, you know, Cameron's talking about different arguments and probably wants to go back and forth with Scott. And he was talking about maybe the contingency argument or something, and he said, and what's the contingency argument of Cameron Bertuzzi? And in other words, he was saying, like, how did you come to be? Tell me about you. He's just so interested.
Yes.
That's humility. It's if you're someone who's interested, that's a great sign of humility.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying. My favorite book is Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton.
Yeah.
Which is, I understand, he wrote years before he became Catholic.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the best.
Was he a Protestant when he wrote that
intellectual?
book? I think
he must have been. He was an Anglican.
Okay.
He wrote, it's like the best intellectual invitation to the Catholic faith, and he wasn't Catholic when he wrote it.
Huh.
Or C.S. Lewis, you know?
Yeah.
Because for me, what that says is grace has to move your will. And grace is mysterious. And there's something in this book, I think it's by Ryan Ennis Topping, his book on Augustine. He says, for the classical tradition, the person you want to be was the sage. But in the Catholic tradition, the person you want to be was the saint. Like, I have a Catholic grade school. I want to have a great little Catholic school. But we cannot deny that there are Catholic saints who never learned how to read. And they're saints. They're in heaven for all of eternity.
That's the goal. Yeah.
That's the goal. So if this is an authentic Catholic school, and the ultimate fruit we're trying to bear in the lives of our graduates is holiness, then there's obviously, being Catholic is very intellectual. It's a thinking man's religion. But nevertheless, we can't deny the fact that holiness is more important. And so for all of your intellectual gifts, can you love? Is your intellect at the service of truth? I think Pope Benedict's the same way. Like, obviously staggeringly intelligent, but in all of his writings, you just get the sense, like, I just want you to understand. I've had a lot of people that are really good to me. Another man, his name's Tom Mars, great man. And he teaches in Arizona. When I was a theology teacher as a priest, he was like kind of my mentor. Really, really smart guy. Went to Stanford, studied physics, and then was a Dominican for 5 years and left and got married. And I think when the high school first hired him, he taught physics and theology. Real sharp dude. But one of the things he said to me is, he said, one of the worst things a student can say to you is, you're really smart. Because what they could be saying beneath that is, nobody knows what you're talking about. And that's not the point of teaching.
That is a really insightful point.
The point of teaching is not so that your students think you're smart. The point of teaching is that they learn what they're supposed to learn.
You know, that I think, like, the person who exemplifies this ability to digest very difficult information and spit it out without diluting the truthfulness of it is C.S. Lewis.
Oh, yes.
Like, you read C.S. Lewis and you get the feeling that people could be with him at the pub and feel so comfortable with him, even though he was brilliant. And his brilliance was shown in that he could break down these very difficult, complex topics.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. I think when knowledge at the service of truth, or knowledge at the service of love, it's how you don't become too esoteric in your language, become kind of like an ivory tower. And I would say analogously, the way that you can work for the Catholic Church for 20 years and not become weird is that you're a missionary. So whatever the intellectual life, like talking to regular people, is to the intellectual life as mission is to working for the church, and that it makes you not go to the extremes. In other words, you're an academic who can only write for other academics.
Yeah.
Or you're someone who works for the Catholic Church who has a curious inability to talk to like regular people at the airport. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, but I also think some people just have a lack of social skills that isn't their fault. And sometimes that goes hand in hand with being super brilliant.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
I mean, I love when I meet people like yourself who are clearly intelligent and also super relatable. And you know what I love is when I meet someone like yourself and I'm like, my parents would be so comfortable around you and they would love you. And they're not super into the faith. I mean, really. I mean, they are a little bit, but then there's other people I know who I think they'd feel very uncomfortable around. They'd feel judged by or something. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I hear that.
But then, I mean, there are people who are super brilliant and, a little weird. And I think it's kind of because they're super brilliant. Do you think?
I think there's probably some truth to that.
Not that you should settle and be like, well, I guess I'm just brilliant and not good at social skills, so I'm not going to try. But
yeah, I mean, social skills is probably a kind of language, and it's maybe just a language that doesn't come as natural to them as other languages.
Father Gregory Pine is an example of someone who's very brilliant and also very relatable and social, and he knows the language of communicating with anybody, it seems.
That guy, I've never met him before, just seen him on your show. Is
You
a
two would get on so well.
world-class teacher. That guy thinks in crystal. That guy is the lucidity of his mind. That is a clear thinker.
You know who else is like this? Jimmy Akin. When I'm with Jimmy and I find myself trying to express a thought to him, I sound like a 2-year-old does to me. I just said the same thing to someone else. I'm pretty sure it was impressive.
Yes.
But now I'm like,
I remember reading a book that Jimmy wrote, and somebody else wrote the foreword. I can't remember. And they said, we used to call him the Terminator, which is it's a very apt description, because in like debates, I don't know why anyone would debate Jimmy.
Yeah,
Akin.
he just debated, who's that? Bart Ehrman. And Jimmy came for blood and got it.
He debated Bart Ehrman.
And destroyed him.
I have got to see that.
I know that's used often, like destroyed, whatever, but no. He absolutely eviscerated. And it was in person, too, in San Diego. So that's nice.
I think only atheists could debate Jimmy Akin. Because to debate Jimmy Akin, you clearly have no fear of God. Because you are bringing a spoon to a knife fight. Like, the man is a crystal clear.
You're bringing a what to a knife fight?
A spoon to a knife fight. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You know, is this true? Trent Horn told me once that he does, I don't know what it's called, when you two-step, there's
square dancing?
Yeah, square
dancing. He calls dances? Yeah, he does that. Yeah. He's a very interesting guy. Like, he wears comic book t-shirts.
Yes.
He reads comic books. He watches sitcoms. He listens to audiobooks on astrophysics in adoration because he's got such a, I don't want to speak for him, but maybe his mind is so active that he needs that in silence. But he also understands that he's worshiping the God of creation, so why not listen to him? Like, and he's like into square dancing, and he's just so unique. I love him. I'm so glad he exists.
I love it.
This is I keep saying this, and I'll keep doing it. It's one of my favorite parts of my job is meeting people that I didn't know existed yesterday. And now because I know them, I know the world's better than I thought it was yesterday. Like, I was wrong yesterday in my assessment of the world because I didn't know you existed. It's like when Neil came in today, I'm like, Neil, you guys, the world just got better. There's so many good people.
Amen.
There's scoundrels as well, but like I tend to be more pessimistic at times, especially given the current state of things. So when I meet people, I'm like, oh my gosh, you've been living every year that I've been alive, you've been alive, and you've got this little community, and your wife and you and your kids, and wow, the world's better. I didn't realize it was this good.
And they're just doing good. I love the analogy of a family is like a Noah's Ark. Okay. You know, you kind of wall it in there, and then one day you unleash the fruitfulness of it. That doesn't mean your kids can't leave the house for 18 years.
To be clear.
But you know, like when Catholic parents are really just intentional with their formation, whether they homeschool or not, but and they're just raising up little saints in their home. And then one day they're going to release these kids in the world, and they are.
Speaking of Chesterton, the most extraordinary thing in the world is an ordinary man, his ordinary wife, and their ordinary children.
Amen.
Yeah.
I would love to have met Chesterton.
Yeah.
Oh,
What do you think that would have been like?
Well, I think he was brilliantly witty and funny. I think the most underrated thing about Chesterton is I think he's a first-rate, like world-class philosopher, like an incredibly penetrating and logical thinker. But since he's like the Prince of Paradox and he loves turn of phrases, I think people, if you totally misunderstand him,
I think he's a trickster.
Exactly. Like if you don't know what he's saying, you think he's like a sophist, which is the one thing he's precisely not. He's like, no, I'm not that. And so I think that's, and when you're that clear of a thinker, because like what you're saying immediately came to him and the weakness of your argument immediately came to him, that he's going to now debunk it in 12 different ways with turns of phrases because it's so clear to him, like, oh, my friend, did you just see what you did? So I bet it would be really delightful to talk to him. And I think you could leave him and have a sense like that's a really smart guy. But I think you would think that's a really delightful guy.
Yeah.
I think a great quality is when you can leave somebody and the most dominant feeling you get from them or their sense is that they're good.
Yeah.
Regardless of how smart they are or accomplished or that you just think like that person is good.
I'm looking for this one line. Golly, I wish I had my glasses. Oh, here they are. Lewis has an essay on cheese. Have you read it?
No.
Oh.
C.S. Lewis has an essay on cheese?
Well, I don't know. Let me see. You keep saying interesting things while I look it up.
Neil, am I hitting my mic on accident? Are you hearing that?
It's not too bad. No.
Okay.
All right, this is such a great line, and I wish I could find the article. Let me see if I can find
Have you
it.
seen Hilaire Belloc's children's?
I've not read him.
Book.
Everyone tells me I need to.
Well, he just has a children's book, and the title is something like "The Girl Who Didn't Shut the Door and Died." It's all of these like delightful stories about children not doing what their parents are supposed to ask them, and then they die horrible deaths.
Wow, I love it. I can't wait to read it.
Hilaire Belloc.
All right, so here's what he says. My forthcoming work in 5 volumes, The Neglect of Cheese in European Literature, is a work of such unprecedented and laborious detail that it is doubtful if I shall live to finish it. Some overflowings from such a fountain of information may therefore be permitted to springle these pages. I cannot yet wholly explain the neglect to which I refer. Poets have been mysteriously silent on the subject of cheese. Virgil, if I remember right, refers to it several times, but with too much Roman restraint, and on he goes. But crikey,
That's
so
fun.
much fun.
Lewis is one of those guys who
And that's Chesterton. You
That's
said
Chesterton.
Lewis earlier.
Oh,
Oh, so I beg your pardon. Thank you. Thanks for the correction. That was Chesterton.
gotcha.
I just read Lewis's conversion story. What's it called again? His story, Surprised by Joy?
Yeah.
Yes.
In it, he talks about encountering Chesterton for the first time and speaks highly of him.
Here's why I think Chesterton is a man for our time.
Okay.
Utterly brilliant, and he would debate. I think it's H.G. Wells.
Yep. Okay.
And there were stories where he would make fun of him, and he'd laugh louder than anyone in the place. So he made lots of jokes about slavery. What other man in England could stand up and offer a seat to 3 ladies? One time he wasn't in the war for some reason, and the woman said, "Why aren't you in the war?" And he said, "Ma'am, if you look to the other side of me, I'm actually there at the front." He makes jokes about himself. He carried a sword and a gun with him ever since the day he got married. A really interesting guy. Wrote an essay a day for 11 years, sort of 4,000 essays. And when he was hired, they said, "You can talk about anything but politics and religion." And he said, "What else is there?" And all he ever wrote about was politics and religion. See, he's just a man of many talents. But I think he combines first-rate intellectual life, obviously, super interested in things and people and the faith, and just utterly, profoundly joyful. He's just such a joyful warrior. Have you read The Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
You know Tom Bombadil?
Yes.
I love Tom Bombadil.
Me too.
And my sense of Tom Bombadil is he's this happy-go-lucky warrior who's just kicking the crap out of bad people as he goes around and sings and hits things.
So Chesterton was like
He's
that. you think?
Chestertonian.
Interesting.
I'm just destroying heresies. I'm like the hammer of heretics.
While laughing.
But I'm only
yeah.
destroying the heresy. And I will laugh with the heretic because he's my brother and I love him,
Yeah.
I think that is, we've all seen on the internet people who we agree with intellectually, but the way they're going about it, you're just kind of like,
Have you ever seen what's it called? The Big Lebowski?
yes.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong? No, Walter, you're not wrong. You're just an asshole. That line. I know I've fallen into that trap many a time here on YouTube, maybe even today, right? But that's what you're talking about. It's yes, you're right, but is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's whenever I start getting like that, I need people around me to be like, Walter, you're not wrong.
I feel like Cameron is probably one of those people in your life.
My bride?
Yeah.
Is she? Do you know her well?
Can I open this on
You
camera?
can. Do you know her well?
I don't. I wish I knew her better.
We're gonna go hang out, have a drink with her.
I'm
After.
hoping I can pray over her.
Please do.
So-
I'd be so honored. She'd love that.
She doesn't know that, so hopefully she's
She
open
would
to it.
love it. Yeah, we'll go see her. Yeah, she's.
I'm gonna take a
she's
drink.
Good, please.
Say
Yeah, Chesterton. Did he ever write about his relationship with his wife? He did. Didn't he say something like marriage is like a duel to the death? Isn't that? What
I think he said
called-
getting married is like going to war. That's what he said.
It's true. It is.
How is that true?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for calling me out there. Let me think about that. Is it true?
How is getting married like going to war? Neil,
I
can you fact check us if whether in fact Chesterton said getting married is like going to war? Whatever.
And I think duel to the death
we're,
too.
we're misquoting him, and then
Well, I think there's.
Marriage is a duel to the death, which no man of honor should decline.
oh yeah,
That's good.
I stand corrected.
Well, I think there's the superficial way, and it's a duel to the death, and then maybe something more substantial, right? So it's superficial in that two people with desires of their own coming under one roof and trying to harness that desire into one thing is a very difficult thing, and often our desires conflict, and then we get grumpy with each other. So there's that kind of superficial way of it being a duel, maybe. But then the more deep thing is maybe it's the false self at war with the other false self. I don't know. Is it a duel to the death? Maybe I don't know what it means. Maybe.
I immediately went to this second interpretation that you gave.
Well, I don't know. What was it? What did I say? I don't think I
The
said
false
anything.
self.
Okay.
It's a duel with yourself. Like if I submit to this woman, I'm gonna have to die.
Honestly, I'm afraid that my wife will listen to this podcast because she'll be flattered about the nice things I've said about her, but I might be being a jerk to her in the future while she watches this, and I'll have to acknowledge, yeah, I know I said I should stop being a jerk.
I think that's one of your endearing qualities, is you're very honest.
You're a jerk to your wife.
No. I mean that you're honest. And self-knowledge is a delightful thing. How does one get self-knowledge?
I don't know. I think I know, but I have a, sometimes you'll tweet. Do you tweet? Do you have a Twitter?
Very, very rarely.
Yeah, I don't anymore. Someone else runs it for me. But back when I did, I came up with this line that I thought, if I'm ever quoted in the future, I think this is worth quoting. What was it? The wonderful thing about self-knowledge and growing in self-knowledge is that no matter what anybody else says or thinks about you, it pales in comparison to the truth you already know. Like, there's nothing you can say about me that I don't know much worse about, myself.
Yeah, I receive what you're saying. I would say that in my experience, part of the ways we learn who we are is by just living life and loving people, and then they reflect back to us.
Amen.
Who we are. So, like, oh, you're really good at that, or you have a propensity for that, or so that's how you learn things.
Marriage does that, baby.
Yeah. So there is that. So it comes about, but I think although I think you do have a gift you have a kind of a natural distrust of your own motivation.
I do.
And
I don't know if that's good or virtuous or not, but I do have that.
I would say it's like all things. I'd say in principle, it's not a bad thing. Like that we have a natural distrust of our own, but we could probably take it too far. And, but yeah, I think you more than your average bear have a sense of. Today you were talking about. I hope you don't mind me sharing this on camera. We just spoke at a conference together, and they give you a stipend, and you received a stipend, and you looked at it, and you said, "Wow, this is too much. I should give it back." You're like, "I'm going to give it back, but I'm going to say it loudly so everyone hears and thinks I'm humble." But just, I think your brain was saying, I just said this. Maybe Father thinks I'm saying that like as a false humility, or so I'm going to say it out loud but the joke's kind of acknowledging that, like even if I gave the money back, but in front of everyone, who was I really doing that for?
Exactly. Yeah.
So anyway.
I did give the money back, by the way.
Are you being serious?
Yeah, of course. But I acknowledge it, so now I get no credit for it. 100%. Whatever they pay me, I did not deserve. Let me tell you that. I mean, my talk should have been an hour. It was 30 minutes with 30 minutes of Q&A because I didn't prepare well enough.
I can't believe that. I'm really impressed. And I'm the one who brought it up.
Yeah. No, I'm the one who said it. No, here's why. And I want to know, has there ever been a Catholic speaker who said, what I just discerned? I think the Lord is saying you should not pay me. Like, I hope there has been someone. But I just think like we're all very good at discerning what the Lord thinks when it's within our financially best interest, Like I'm just so afraid of justifying my crap. So I work against it. So I heard a talk 3 or 4 years ago about becoming a Catholic hack, And this person wrote a great article and they were like, like the tattooed Latin mass going guy or the whatever. There was a ton of things. And as soon as I read that article, I called Steubenville and quit youth conferences.
Seriously?
Yeah. It was like 2019. I'm like, I can't do it anymore. For a couple of reasons. One, there's bound to be another middle-aged Caucasian dude who can talk about sex that isn't because I'm filling his place. Right?
How many Australians? Weren't you the Australian?
I was also getting older. And then you also then you encounter people who you're like, you probably should have quit a while back, right? Because you're 82 and you're still speaking at youth conferences and you've just found a good thing. And I'm afraid of becoming that. I'm afraid of this becoming that, which is why I teeter on the edge constantly of burning everything down. But then I'd regret it because someone came up to me and this is so funny. Neil, you'll like this. Someone in a live stream, you must have been here, I think, because they were asking about how do they know when they should propose to their wife because they're not financially stable. And I'm like, do it now. Do it now. He did it then. And then I met him and his fiance. And he asked me if I could come to the wedding. And then I met another kid who said because of our episode on homeschooling, and this is Steve Rummelsberg, the guest, it was his brilliance, no doubt. And I'm saying that to be humble. he told his parents, can I homeschool? And so they homeschooled him, and then 5 other families followed, and then they started a co-op, and 15 other families joined this year. He said that was all because of this episode that he heard. So praise God.
Glory
I
be to
do
God.
believe that our
That's
Lord
amazing.
uses my bullshit as manure for the growth of many. Even that, and the good I do, and the good my guests do.
If I could just acknowledge something here.
Yep.
You made a point earlier about knowing that certain people exist in the world and just... I'd never heard of Stephen Rummelsberg. I just saw him on your show, and it was utterly delightful.
Isn't he wonderful?
He recommended a book on by a guy named Henry T. Edmondson on John Dewey, and I went and bought it and read it, and I was like, that book was amazing. And anyway, he's just like a fountain of... I love listening to people who I'm like, that's what an educated person sounds like.
See, but that's what's happening now. People are listening to you right now, and you're inspiring them. So I'm so honored and blessed. So these are the two halves of my mind.
True.
Honored and blessed to have this show. I love doing it. There's another part of me that's like, burn the whole friggin' thing down and go like work at a bookstore in downtown Steubenville. And I'd be miserable in a second if I did that. But
I think you and I we're similar in that way.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do have...
what is that? That piss and vinegar.
So here, it could be that. Patrick Lencioni has something called Widget. You ever heard of this?
No.
It's like different kind of work styles. And I think it stands for wonder, inventiveness, discernment, galvanizing, empowerment, and tenacity. I know, just bear with me. And the idea is like you love 2 of them, you're pretty good at 2 of them, 2 of them you don't like. So mine are wonder and galvanizing. I love big ideas. I love thinking of things. My parish could do this. My parish could do that. And I'm also good at galvanizing, getting people excited about it. Like, we should do this, right? So I'm terrible at tenacity. Like the first time we hit a roadblock, I'm like, forget everything I said, just abandon all hope. So that's not good. What are we giving up for Lent, Father? Hope. Like we're going well. So wonder though, I think that's part of it. I don't know about you. Like you're trying to reimagine the Catholic life every week. Like, am I really loving Jesus?
Yeah.
Am I doing this? Is anybody doing this? At least I can only control myself.
Should we move to Sri Lanka? We should we?
Yeah. So I don't know. Is that part of it?
I think it's part of my idealism.
Yeah.
My melancholic side.
So I'm calling that wonder, like big ideas and just...
Yeah, that's hugely me. Big ideas. What I don't have is follow through.
And you know what you and I could do?
What?
We could either grow in virtue or hire assistants, and we both hired assistants.
Yeah.
Which helps a lot.
I need people. Like
Me too.
Like Neil crushes things consistently. I'd get a great idea, do it for 3 weeks, and then get over it. I do that constantly. That's why I have to I have to be suspicious of my new enthusiasms for spiritual devotions. Because as soon as I feel that in me, like, I'm going to be the guy who prays this thing every day. I need a prayer book, and I'm going to carry that prayer book around. It's going to become really tattered and old, and everyone's going to, this is going to be my thing. It's like I'm trying to find security in things I shouldn't find security in. That's part of it. But it's also just I get really enthusiastic and then I get bored. That's my life. And I've done trying to
Can I agree anymore with them?
I am done trying to stop getting enthusiastic about things because I seem incapable of being able to do that. So what I'm doing now is trying, like when I notice it, be like, whoa there, Betsy, just, you know what's going to happen soon, so just go easy. Do you think a lot of people are like that, or is it just a specific temperament?
I don't know, but my
Are you
friend,
like that?
what you just said, it's shocking how similar I am to that.
Is it? Give us an example, or flesh that out.
So you and I know Melanie Pritchard.
Love her.
Love her. Amazing woman. And I remember being in college, maybe just a little older, and we'd be talking about pro-life stuff. And I'd be in a group of people and we'd be talking about possible things we could do. And I'd be like, you know what we should do? I'd get fired up about something. We should have a magazine. We should call it Mad Max Magazine based on St. Maximilian Kolbe. And he's upset. So I like all those ideas. And people around me nodded their heads, getting excited because I'm good at wonder and galvanizing. And get all the people excited. And the next day, Melanie would call me about like, okay, so what are we going to do about that? And I was like, what? Like everything you were saying at the meeting. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know.
That's me.
Like, let's just...
I was just thinking things through.
Let's get a chai tea and I'll just like hang out. I mean, like literally, I would just get, never mind. So I've learned that if I've been a boss before, I supervise people, and I had to learn very quickly when I walk into an employee's office and I had an idea. There were some things that I wanted them to do, and there were times when I was just thinking out loud.
That's it.
And I had to be super clear, like, hey, just
right
to be clear,
now, I'm
just thinking out loud.
Yes, I do
so
the
I'm
same
an external
thing.
processor,
Yes,
just thinking out loud. I'm not saying we're going to do this. I'm not, okay.
Good.
And because the first time I went in there and we should be doing this, or why aren't we doing this as a way to support parishes? You know, all this idea, and then you come back a week later, the person's like, "Father, I've been working on that thing." And you're like,
no.
"What thing?"
Oh.
And it's kind of embarrassing. We didn't remember the thing they're talking about that you were so excited about last week. And I'm like,
on a much simpler level, one thing I do is talk everybody into watching a movie late at night, and then I go to bed. I find everyone's like, all right, let's do it. Like, I'll have like 3 beers in me, and I'll be like, what if we just watch the whole second season of The Office? And like, shut up. Like, no, come on, let's do it. And everyone's like, all right. Halfway through the first episode, I'm like, all right, I'm going to bed. I didn't know that about me until my best friend, Todd Ma, up in Canada, and my wife were like, you do it all the time.
I love that so much.
Speaking of self-knowledge, right? Being open to the mirroring back of people in your life. Like, you got to think, like, that's why Trump's hair looked the way it did. Forgive me, I don't mean to pick on people, but maybe he didn't have anybody in his life who could be like, you know, like, maybe that doesn't look so good. I don't know. I don't mean to pick on Trump or anybody, you know, like,
yes.
We need people in our life who have the freedom to criticize us and for us to hear that.
Yeah. It's amazing how you still learn things about yourself as you get older and older and older. You're like, I do that. Thank you for pointing that out to me.
What's also nice, though, is not just the criticisms, but when people really who you trust are affirming you. Because I think 99% of the things people affirm me on, I dismiss. But I trust you. And when you affirm me, especially when people affirm you on specific things, you know it's not just a general, hey, you're a nice person. It's almost like you do this thing, and it's interesting to me. And I kind of like that. Like, oh.
Yeah, I was praying recently with Psalm 139.
Okay.
And in it, the Lord says, the psalmist says, David, with all my ways you are familiar. That's what he says to the Lord. With all my ways you are familiar. And I just love that. Like, the Lord knows everything about us, like the quirkiness.
He's not surprised.
As I understand, we don't know where thumbprints come from, fingerprints, because even identical twins don't have the same. They think maybe it's caused by, like, when you're touching the walls of your mom's womb. Part of the reason what causes the grooves of it. I'm not a scientist. I've just, you read one article, you're an expert.
So let's say that was the case.
Yes.
And then you can get back to your story. Could we theoretically prevent a child from touching the womb and it not have any fingerprints?
Yeah.
That'd be weird.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Somebody's run the com box losing their mind because they're studying this. Right? That's not at all true. Oh no. But like the Lord knit us together in our mother's womb. It's the same psalm, but just how particular it is. Like as particular as your thumbprint.
Neil's Googling it. I can hear him clicking away.
But anyway, just that just to your point, like when a compliment means so much more when a person has been present to you enough to notice things about you that's totally you.
Yeah.
And for the Lord to say, for David to say, with all my ways you are familiar. So when I receive a word from the Lord, it's that specific. Isn't that kind of wild?
Wait, say that last bit again.
So when I receive a word from the Lord, like he speaks truth over my life.
Yeah.
It's for me and it's only for me. And there's this spiritual guy named Graham Cook. He's like a Protestant. I've only listened really to one of his talks, but I really liked it. And in it, one of the things he says that I love, he's a British guy. He says, whatever the Lord is he's relentless. And whatever the Lord is like towards you, he's relentlessly like that. And I thought, that is so true. The Lord is so intentional. And he's like relentlessly intentional with you. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
For me, that looks like I've received graces on silent retreats and you write them down in your journal. And you pick it up like 10 years later. And you read it. And not only is it true, but it's become truer. As you've lived longer, and you have more evidence of like, I am like that, Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
I think also in order to hear your either criticism or praise, I have to trust you. And my trusting you will lead to me like disarming myself before you, Because don't you think like, I don't know, we're often on guard against each other, wondering what your angle is or whether you're for me or against me or making fun of me or criticizing unfairly But if I trust you, then I can just sort of lay my hands to the side and receive what it is you want to speak into my life,
That's certainly true. Vulnerable comes from the Latin word vulnus, meaning wound. Isn't that weird?
I didn't know that.
To be vulnerable is to make myself so vulnerable, even my wounds are exposed,
That's the only way friendship can happen, don't you think?
Absolutely. That's right.
It's also the most beautiful trait in human beings, I think.
Being vulnerable?
Yeah. The most beautiful. And I don't mean like showing my woundedness necessarily. I guess I just mean being unguarded and honest. That's what I mean. I think the ugliest thing in human beings is pride and arrogance. Like when you sense that in people, you're just totally disgusted. Everybody is. But when someone's actually being vulnerable, not for the sake of clicks or money or to make a show, you know, like on some kind of soap opera, or like, rather on Oprah or the Ellen DeGeneres show, whatever, you know. But when they're just like before you and they haven't even processed how their woundedness could end up being a blessing. They're just like, because it's easy to talk about my woundedness if it comes to full circle and there's a bow on it and now I'm better because of it. But if I'm in the middle of this suffering and I don't know how it wraps up well, or if it even could, but I'm just bearing it, gosh, that's beautiful.
You're right.
Oh,
that is beautiful.
Yeah, like this. It was so cool yesterday in my talk. This woman gets up to the microphone. She looked like she was in her 60s or 70s. She talked about how like when her husband's away, she gets lonely and masturbates or something. And I like, okay, that's probably not appropriate to share in front of 800 people. But I just thought, oh, I love you. I just thought I was so endeared by her. Because the way she said it wasn't gratuitous. She just talked about this struggle that she had. But it was just something about, I said, whenever someone's like that before me, I love them.
Can I talk about the Lord for a minute here?
Yes.
So there are priests. There are a couple of priests in my life who I don't see very often. And when I see them, I just want to buy them stuff. I just want to buy these priest stuff. And I'm in the spiritual direction program. One of them is there. And I saw him reading this book in the bookstore. And I was like, I really want to buy that book for him. So I was trying to see what the book was so I could buy it for him. And I found out that one of them likes cookies. So I was like, I know about these dudes' cookies. Now, the reason why I'm at is very simple, because they're CFRs. So they take vows of poverty. They don't, as I understand, really have money. They can't really buy anything. So for them to get anything, I'd have to buy it for them. Mm-hmm. And I find that irresistible. I don't feel that way about any other priest. When I see another priest, I'm like, I want to buy that guy something. I don't feel that way. I'm like, we both get a paycheck. We'll both be fine, right? And the point of me telling you that is, I was like, why do I want to buy these guys stuff? And it's like, I think it's because I find their poverty so attractive. The fact that when they're looking at something or they want a cookie and they can't buy it for themselves, so somebody has to buy it for them. So anyway, I just had this insight when Lent, like how attractive our poverty must be to the Lord. And like we're afraid of poverty, but
there's a great line in the Psalms that says, he has never despised the poverty of the poor.
Yes.
I don't know where it is, but it is there. I remember reading it and it knocked me over.
So if you and I think vulnerability is like so unbelievably attractive, like when people have it, we're just drawn to it. Like,
why do I think that's not true of me?
And so in prayer, how honest can we be? Like how real with the Lord when he's, how attractive is it to the Lord?
Yeah.
He hates. The one thing we know the Lord hates is hypocrisy.
He's cast down the mighty from their thrones.
Hypocrisy. And it comes from the Greek word meaning to a mask, like an actor, to wear a mask. The Lord is like, what are you doing? Somebody once said, the Lord doesn't love the image you have of yourself. He only loves you. So to think that like the projection I have of myself, that's actually not even real. Do you know what I mean?
It's like Bitcoin. Yeah. or stocks or something. Yeah. It's not a thing.
But I find that idea so delightful going into a prayer time of the Lord delights in poverty. He delights in vulnerability. And you can just like put it out there.
Oh, if we really believed that, our prayer would get exponentially better.
Come on. Yes.
And so often we end up it's a posture in prayer.
That's right.
I remember when I got married and we lived in Ireland, I set up a little chapel for myself because I'm melancholic. And I got a very nice wooden kneeler and a big painting of Christ and would pray the devotions I got enthusiastic about for 48 hours and then moved on to another one with my books and my candle wax and everything. And my wife would like just take care of like my son and breastfeed him, and it was messy, but she was the holy one. I just had this like idea of how prayer should look. I've said this on the show before. I'll say it real quickly. Old Matt Fradd would say to young dad Matt Fradd, you need to relax. It's okay that your children are like laying down while you pray the rosary. You just chill. But that posturing versus poverty in prayer is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
It's like I needed things to look right with my book, with its ribbons, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. They're all fantastic, but they can be a wall.
I'm going to start preaching here for a bit, if you don't.
Go.
So last Sunday, it was it's where the gospel says something like, the man knocks at the door at midnight and says, I have somebody coming and I need some bread. He's like, oh, I'm in bed and my kids are in bed. He says, if he will not respond to him because of his friendship, he will respond to him because of his persistence. And I was watching this commentary by Brent Petrie, and he says that Greek word for persistence, I think it's pronounced enidea. Idea means respect, so enidea means like no respect. It means like shamelessness. So, and the Lord is saying, that's how I want you to come to me. Like no respect, like shamelessly. You'll just ask for it. I mean, imagine if somebody called you at 1:00 this morning and said like, hey Matt, I have like this breakfast. Can I just like come over for like 6 eggs? And you're like, what time is it? Oh, it's like 1:00, but can I like get those eggs? I have breakfast. You're like, are you kidding me, dude? Like, I'm in bed and my kids are all asleep. Like, I'm actually in the bushes. I just thought you'd probably get them. So I'm here. Could you just come out and give them to me? Like, you're so shameless. But you know who else is shameless?
I would love it.
Children.
Yeah.
And the Lord is encouraging us. So I think you learn more.
Because that does sound like what a kid would do.
Absolutely. They don't care.
I think what would freak me out about my next door neighbor doing that would be, it seems like the beginning of a horror movie. It doesn't, because honestly, I'd be thrilled if my neighbor did that, because I love that kind of, I love people being that. I love that you think we have that kind of relationship that you can do that. Like, that makes me love you more. But it just sounds strange. Like, no one needs 6 eggs that much. You could have asked me in the morning. But that is something a kid would do.
Yeah. They have no decorum. They don't know, they have no sense of like...
What does decorum mean?
It's just like right order.
I know what it means, but you seem to know the etymology of things.
Like I don't know the etymology of it, but like like things have a right order. There's a custom. There's like, oh, it's too late, we'll call them tomorrow.
Yeah,
kids don't.
Kids
like,
don't
I want a
care.
Pop-Tart. It's 11:00 at night. Like, I want a Pop-Tart. It's like, well, I'm sorry.
It's 11:00 at night. I didn't ask for the time. I asked for a Pop-Tart.
So the great irony is when you're praying and you're frustrated with your kid who's walking up to you in the middle of prayer and asking for something, they're probably actually teaching you something about how to talk to your Father, your Heavenly Father, in that. Just like, I'm just going to go interrupt him and say like, hey, Dad, can I have some chocolate milk? You're like, we're praying the rosary right now. But he's just going to ask you, you know what I mean? And so you're like, Father.
Until you're like, yes, fine, get the chocolate milk. God. Anyway.
Oh, man. In his book, Hungry for God, Ralph Martin says, if he had to use one word to define faith, biblical faith, it would be gutsy. So what was the conversation like between the 4 guys who dropped the paralytic? Like, yeah, we're going to go see Jesus, and there's going to be a part, and we're going to get him in front of Jesus because he's like a wonder worker and a healer. And they get there, it's packed. House is packed. There's people at the door like 6 feet deep. Like, oh, we can't go. And they're like, oh, man, their friend, like, we got to go. And he's like, bro, we're not leaving. He's like, we can't get in, dude. We got to go tomorrow. He's like, we're climbing on the roof. No, we're not. Yes, we are. We're going to drop him down through the roof.
How are we going to bring him up
bro,
there?
We don't even know this guy. Yeah, exactly. We're going to break the roof. He's like, we'll be legends. They'll print t-shirts. We're doing this. And they did it. They took his roof off and they dropped. And could you imagine being in the middle of a party? Your studio's like, are you kidding me right now? And a guy gets dropped down. Then Jesus, I'm in the room. The owner's like, come on. And everyone's just like angry. And Jesus is like, your sins are forgiven. Like he just delights in like, oh, here they come. Isn't that amazing? That's gutsy. Or the one with the hemorrhage, if I just touch the hem of his garment. And all sorts of people touched Jesus that day, right? But only to one did he say, someone has touched me. Power has left me. Like, if I just get in there and, that's childlike.
Decorumless.
That's
not a word,
gutsy.
but I like it. Decorumless.
Yeah. What does decorum mean, Neil?
You could hear him typing.
I'm looking at it. It says it's from the Latin...
From the heart? I don't know.
Yeah, cool.
Decorus, which is its own Latin word, which means seemly. So it seems pretty...
Seemly, proper would be cool.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so dec is from Proto-Indo-European, to take, accept. So like accepted. So
the opposite would be like uncouth. When somebody's like uncouth.
If I had to like guess, I'm like, okay, decorum, 10 heart alcoholic beverage that pirates make. Cool, that's weird.
And the actual is just decorum. Oh, it's basically a Latin word that means decorum.
Exactly.
Yeah, decorumless. We have to be shameless.
Yeah.
Matt, could you scoot a little bit left?
This way?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is that better?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Gosh, yeah, I want to do that. I'm excited to go to adoration now.
That's when
But I'm not if I got to go there and say all the right things in order to feel a certain way. I think that's what we think prayer is. You do this thing until it's like prayer. Good prayer is when you pray enough to no longer feel guilty about not praying. Like that's how we approach prayer sometimes. Or
yeah, I mean, there's certainly truth to you get better at praying by praying. So I think you get better at what you're saying. You just kind of relax into it in a way where you're like, I'm just going to talk to the Lord. When I was in seminary, we had practicum classes. So that's like when you have mass practicum. So you practice mass or confession practicum. You do fake confessions. It's pretty wild. Anyway, so this one guy gets up there and he's from, I want to protect his identity. We'll say he's from the Midwest.
Okay.
And he gets up there and he's going to do a fake mass, right? So he gets up there and he's like, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, amen. The Lord be with you. And he keeps going. He's from the Midwest.
And he sounds like he's Irish?
Yes. So somebody, he doesn't get far in before, I can't remember the student or the teacher's like, hey, like, buddy. Like,
please stop that.
Why are you doing that? He's like, doing what? His voice goes back to normal. Like you have like a brogue. You have like an Irish brogue. Do you hear that? And he's like,
am I crazy? You guys hear that, right?
Exactly. And he's like, oh no, I don't know. Like, okay, no, go back to it. And he's like, let's call to mind our sins and ask the Lord for, So anyway, this goes on longer than people stop him. So we're like, what is going on? So finally we discovered his childhood pastor was like an Irish missionary. So he was raised listening to the mass pray it in an Irish brogue. And I sometimes think that's how we pray. Like in an affected kind of way. Like we'll watch somebody else. I remember doing that. I remember going to adoration, like watching the backs of other people and being like, I wonder what they're saying. Like maybe they know what you're supposed to say. Or going to mass as a teenager and seeing someone with their eyes closed who seemed like they were really entering in. And I remember thinking they must know something I don't know.
Yes.
Like how are they entering in? But the main point of the story is that, I think we learn, whether rightly or wrongly, this kind of mask or, a way to pray that's just not us,
Mm-hmm. I do.
So, a conversation's good when afterwards you want to pray. Like, I want to go pray right now.
Yeah, I do.
So I hope people watching.
Yeah, it's like riding a bike. Like I could explain to you, I wouldn't know how to, but I'd have Neil look it up, how to ride a bike and how to balance and how you have to hold your body and where you have to put the weight of your body when doing this particular thing. And I could explain all of that to you. You could write a huge essay on it, but not know how to ride a bike.
Yes.
It's like you have to give yourself over to it in order to make the thing work. And faith is sort of like that. Prayer is sort of like that. Maybe.
Amen.
Yeah. Is it? Am I right?
Yeah. I think the two basic things you'd say in any prayer life is you should start and never stop. Just start praying. It's like that famous adage when somebody asks Dr. Crape, what's the best translation of the Bible? And he's like, the one you'll read. Just start reading it. Just read it. If you're not reading it all, reading anyone's better than not reading any of them. So when it comes to prayer, it's just starting is good.
I've heard somebody say, pray as you can, not as you can't. Just pray that way.
I like that.
I think it's our exaggerated notions of prayer that often prevent us from praying. Prevents me from praying. I have this idea of how prayer ought to look and how Bible reading ought to feel. And when it doesn't match up with that, I think I'm failing, and I don't like failing, so I stop that thing.
So the expectation of what it should be prevents from just
like
entering in.
family prayers like that. I genuinely thought that the Hahn family just back when I didn't know them, must all be kind of kneeling around. One of the kids is levitating again. And then and so then you compare that with the circus at your house, kid hanging off the friggin' rafters. And what are rafters? I don't know what rafters are. I keep saying hanging off the rafters.
Are those the metal bars, like the metal structure?
Yeah, I guess that's right. Around the curtains?
Oh, I thought it was more like structural than that. Like actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, rafters are just like the sloped part that meet in a construction. So like the arch
rafters,
your roof tiles.
So much I don't know.
I know.
Like I don't know how plastic's made. Do you?
I don't.
Do you know how? Like someone does, and they're commenting right now. But like, how do they make the can not have an opening and yet be filled with water? Do they attach it? Does that top lid thing get pressed onto it? And I don't know anything.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
And then someone's like, what's your thoughts on evolution? Like, I don't know how plastic's made. But that doesn't mean I can't know anything about evolution, but it just means I know so little about everything.
Yeah. I'll start with plastic, get the Stegosaurus. But let's start with plastic. Like dinosaurs.
I like to say when it comes to like theological and philosophical topics, I'm like 3 questions deep and then I've got nothing. Then it's bedrock. Oh, okay, but what about that? Okay, but what about this? I got nothing now. Like you've hit bedrock. I know nothing.
I think that was one of my fears of coming on your show, Pints with Aquinas. Because I feel like you're an essentialist. You have a natural philosophical bent. In other words, you want to know like what something is.
Like
what's
rafters.
the essence? Like what's the nature of the word decorum? What's the nature of a rafter? Right?
Yeah.
How do you make plastic? And so I was afraid I would like say something and you'd be like, well, what does that mean? I'd be like, blah, 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 blah. You'd be like, but what about? And I'd be like, no,
I got nothing left.
What's decorum mean? No
I
idea.
don't know.
Turns out it means decorum. So
Yeah.
kind of buried the
Ten
lead there.
heart rum.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
something you said before that I want to go back to. Maybe it's gone. What was it? Prayer. Being ourselves.
Exaggerated notions of prayer prevent us from praying.
Oh, I'm in like a spiritual direction program. And you learn like different methods, like Ignatian prayer, like how to pray Ignatian style. And one of the things I really appreciate is one of the priests who's leading it is he's like, when you go into prayer, he's like, this is really important. Just like forget everything we ever taught you. Because all it will be is a block to communion. Which is so true.
Okay.
Like when I was a kid, I was a youth leader and we learned something called FORM, which stands for Family, Occupation, Recreation, Message. And so I still use that when I talk to people. Like, oh, where's your family from? And I did it with Neil like an hour ago. And like, yeah, do you have siblings? And so it's just a way that you learn. But it's like small talk, trying to, when then something hits and then you go into like, I feel like praying scriptures that way, you know? Like you're reading and then something kind of hits and you're like, ooh, with all my ways you're familiar. And then you kind of zoom in on that, you know? But I also think that there's something wrong with methods to pray. But at one point you just have communion and then you want to just forget about that and just like share your heart with the Lord. You know, like I think Merton said, we say prayer so that we can pray. You know, vocal prayer is really important. The Lord taught us the Our Father, so obviously it's really important. But I think it's because we need that kind of that stuff. But eventually we want to get to kind of heart-to-heart communion, you know, where I'm being myself and I'm being vulnerable and being real with the Lord. And it's scary, like really praying. I think pure goodness is a lot scarier than pure darkness.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it's so substantial.
What is pure dark? What do you mean by pure darkness?
Well, of course, I guess strictly speaking.
The absence of good.
Exactly. So I guess strictly speaking, nothing can be pure evil. Because it would be,
but like evil, so like you would encounter somebody who's kind of what we would consider like an evil man.
Yeah. Like,
that's less frightening
like
than Mother Teresa.
I guess the depth of their depravity doesn't seem to me as...
It goes less deep than goodness goes up.
Yeah. Like when somebody's good...
It's broader.
Yes. I mean, there's a vibrancy to them and a fullness, a plenitude, you know? That evil, it's just so boring, you know? Didn't Lewis say something like, you know, how monotonously boring have all the dictators of the world been?
Yeah.
How alike and how
And then you
gloriously
line up
different
the
the saints of God have been?
Yeah.
And so it's something like that.
Do you find when you spiritually direct people or when you just counsel them that most of us or many of us feel we have to fit a particular mold to be holy? I imagine the answer is obviously yes, but I want to kind of go into that a little deeper. I remember a friend of mine, Renee Bennett, lovely woman, lives in Brisbane, Australia. She was on net and she shared with me that for the first half of the year, she was trying to be like soft-spoken. And because there were people on her team like that and they were really holy and she thought that's what holy meant. And so she tried really hard to act like that and then it nearly killed her. And then she realized, okay, I don't have to fit that particular mold. Do you think, have you seen that?
That's a good question. I find, so when I was in seminary, I used to bring stuff to my spiritual director. Hey, this is going on. Like, I'm going through some crisis. You know, I'm falling in love with the lunch lady. Those plastic gloves.
And she feeds me. Literally.
her hands are so modest. They give so much, right? Yeah. She feeds me. That's right. So anyway, I would be telling everybody about it. And then I'd go tell my spiritual director. And he would say something like, and when you told the Lord about that, what did he say?
Called out.
And I'd be like, what? He's like, so when you told the Lord that, what did he say? And I'm thinking to myself, I've told everyone about that. And I've prayed like multiple holy hours since the last time I saw you. And I honestly don't know like what the Lord thinks about that. Because I don't know if I've ever just told him about it.
Wow.
So I've come to the habit in my life now. If somebody's in my office and they're telling me about something in their life, I try to listen, really try to understand where they're coming from, trying to meet them in that place. And then I'll ask some question like that. And if they say, I don't know, I'll just say, well, why don't we just do it right now? So why don't we just take a minute or two of silence. And why don't you just tell the Lord, you can use the exact same language you just told me. Why don't you just go ahead and we'll both close our eyes and you can just tell me when you're done. How's that sound? It can just be a few minutes. Great. So then that's what I do. And then I'll be sitting there and then usually I hear somebody talking and open my eyes again. And then I don't say, well, did you hear anything? I just say, what did he say? And if I had to be honest with you, Matt, it's 100%. 100%. Nobody's ever opened their eyes and been like, I don't know. It was just like dark. People have told me like I received this image or this memory came to me or the scripture or he told me this really beautiful thing. 100%. So I think that's trying to get past it. I'm a big fan of don't tell me, show me. So you can tell me like, be yourself. But it's kind of like, look, you just told me that thing. Why don't you just tell the Lord right now, just in the exact same language you just told me and see what he says. And then the Lord talks and it's amazing. Of course, the Lord doesn't talk like we talk, but so I don't really answer your question.
I forgot my question.
I guess that's the way to try to solve the problem of like people having
I see. Yeah.
An image of holiness.
Yeah.
But I think that's true. And I think it takes a while because, we even have to die to our notion of what we think holiness should be.
Well, like, for example, I mean, you and I have spoken at conferences the last several years. We encountered different people. Do you think these different people are comfortable in their own unique ways of being? Or are we all trying to be like Trent or Scott or whoever else? Or do you think, no, it seems like there's a vast array of characters and it's good that they're different and I don't know what I'm asking.
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. Chesterton says something like your life will become a lot better when you just realize that people just don't care that much about you.
Love it so
like
much.
You're just not that important.
It's so true.
People
Orthodoxy. Yeah, that's where he writes it.
Much, and I think that's generally true.
I feel like there was a big part of my life where I tried desperately to shave off my idiosyncrasies and be normal.
That's the best part of you. Can I share with you a memory that I delight in? Her name was Katie. I'm not going to say her last name. Anyway, we were at a youth conference.
I was as well.
Mm-hmm. We're watching her. She's talking on the stage. Mm-hmm. And you're saying something like, oh, she's so beautiful. So
Hartfield, right?
I wasn't going to use her name, but here we are.
Oh, she's lovely.
She's lovely.
She's so beautiful.
And I remember thinking,
I probably said something like, I think I'm falling in love with her.
Yes, exactly.
I fall in love with most people.
Exactly. And we're standing next to each other right on stage. And as I've told you many times, I was thinking, man, Australian men, they're just freer than American men. Like American men's bandwidth of emotion is like this, and Australians are just like high highs, low lows.
Again, how many?
Valleys, peaks.
I think you only know me from
That's
Australia.
Probably true. The sample size is pretty small. So, but here we are. And you said it again. You're just like, oh, she's so beautiful. I mean, look at her. Are you looking at her? I'm like, yeah.
She's fine.
Someone else is a free man, you know? Yeah. And then as she comes off the stage, she walks straight up to us and you said, you're so beautiful. And I was like, this man is free.
Well, I tell you what I do now is I compliment women now, but only when my wife's around. Okay. So they know it's not weird.
Yes.
I mean, they still might think it's weird. But I do that. I'm like, you are beautiful. My wife is the most unintimidated, unjealous person ever. So it doesn't bother her. Laura Horn would kill Trent in his sleep if he ever did that. But my wife, I love just telling people they're beautiful. But shaving off my idiosyncrasies, I think a lot of people feel that way. I've stopped doing that. I'm trying to come to reconcile myself with myself by accepting the Father's love for me.
Are you being serious?
Yes, 100%. Okay. Yeah, he really likes me.
He does.
Yeah.
He delights in you.
Yeah. So when I can live out of that place, it's good. But when I don't, I feel it. And what's kind of embarrassing is everybody else sees it on YouTube as well. But even that I give to the Lord.
Amen.
You know? And if I can't abandon it, I abandon that.
Well, here's the deal. I mean, Jesus says, if your child asked you for a piece of bread, would you give him a rock? And he asked you for a stick, would you give him a snake?
Never would I be tempted to do that.
And he said, if you who are wicked know how to give good gifts, then how much more your Heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit who asks. And I think you're utterly delightful.
Thank you.
And I'm a dirty sinner.
I totally believe you, and I think the same of you.
Limited view. So if I think you're delightful,
I know.
then what must the Father think of you?
One of my favorite things to do when I give people gifts, and they're like, no, I couldn't accept that. I'm like, listen, if you can't accept this, how will you ever accept Jesus' love for you? I shame them into accepting the gift.
And now receive the Eucharist on your knees. Just like, receive that gift with a little...
Yeah, but it's true. Like, if you can't receive people's gifts, like, what does it say about you? Like, you're a prideful person because Jesus gave himself for you.
I've been a seminarian for like a year, and this guy, he found out me and this other guy were seminarians, tried to give us money. I don't know, $50, $100. He's like, here you go, you know. We're like, no. And he's like, here you go. I'm like, no. And he looks us in the eye and he's like, dead serious. He's like, you need to learn how to say thank you.
Yeah.
And then just hands the money to us. And I was like, okay.
What a humble thing to say. Because in saying that, he both gave you money and then made it such that you didn't have a pleasant feeling of him as he walked off. It's humble.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, I think part of it, I've heard you say this in a talk, you know, the Christian faith sometimes not too hard to believe, it's too good to believe.
I heard that from somebody, but yes, it is. It's too good.
Yeah.
Everything else has let me down. Nothing has actually worked. No drink has ever been as good as it said it would be. No, whatever.
Do you know how earlier I said I love being Catholic?
Yeah.
And you asked why, and I'm like, it's the best. And you're like, no, whatever. Part of the reason, though, this is the best way I can say it. It might sound cliche, it's the best way I can say it. I've come to believe on some deep, fundamental level, I want everything.
Oh my God.
And that Jesus is the only one who can give it to me. Like, I want everything.
I want everything, and I'm going to tell you what I mean by that after the show is over, because it was scandalized the heck out of people. I want everything.
You'll cut the tape.
Yeah, I want it all. Yeah.
What if I know you did it, and it's just like you stand up, and it's just like, beep, and you're like doing like hand motions, and you're like talking loudly, and like clearly writing something at one point, and you're like shooting guns, and everyone is like, what is it? And there's like 3 minutes of that. Beep, you sit down, you're like, and everyone's like,
I'm crying. My buttons are askew somehow.
Your shirt's gone. And you're like, what does Matt want? And then your sport coat's still on, but you're bare chested. Like, wait a minute.
It seems wild. Yeah, but idiosyncrasies. I mean, I say that not just for my sake and to share. I'm not trying to share a story about myself. I just think a lot of us feel that way. We feel unlovable. We feel weird. We feel awkward. And I wonder, as a priest, the pressure to be some, I don't know, idiosyncrasies person with a strong jawline and a specific way of speaking and no weirdness about you. I would feel that. Like, if I became a priest today, I'd delete my YouTube channel and try to have no history and try to live perfectly, which would be the wrong thing to do, I think. But
yeah, I mean, I think I'm as insecure as any other person. But if I had to be honest with you, I really like myself. And
have you always?
And I can always, and the other thing is that I can crack myself up. Like, I can think of things.
That's going to be a clip.
I can
just
think
a
of
2-second clip. I like myself. I can really crack myself up.
Sorry, narcissism definition. Click here. I really like myself. Yeah. So I'm trying to be vulnerable, Matt. Trying to be real. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. We think about being vulnerable as talking about my wounds.
Yeah.
But then, like, it's also hard to, when you talk about receiving gifts, if I like my personality, to not receive that and to not acknowledge that I like it. If I think you're delightful and there are parts of me that I like, then isn't it humble to say, yeah, I like that, you know? So anyway, and I can crack myself up. Like, I can think of things by myself that I think are funny, and I can laugh out loud. That's what I just thought of. Like, oh, that's, like, thanks, Lord, you know? So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. Have you always been like that?
No, certainly not. Certainly not. I mean, I like acne as a teenager. I grew up just like everyone else. So, you don't like what you look like there. I don't like the fact that I'm getting older, and I feel vain about that.
What is it about your appearance that's changing that you don't like the most? Is it, I don't know. I'm just, people will, I don't want to make you think I'm looking at anything, but like, is it like backaches, thinning hair, pot belly?
Yeah, I would say thinning hair, just like, my teeth are just going to get less white, and it's just like, that's what I'm going to look like,
Yeah.
And, I think it's just getting older. So anyway, all that to say, I was actually excited when I became a priest that I became a priest.
I became a priest.
I'm still myself.
Yeah.
And I was really delighted about that. I was like, okay, I'm still me. And there were times when I would do something and I'm like, I don't know if a priest does that. I'm like, well, I'm a priest. I'm about to do it. I mean, that sounds like I'm doing scandalous things.
I know what you mean.
That's the first time I was a mule. I crossed the border. Like, I'm not doing illegal things, carrying drugs or something. But I just mean, whatever it was where, I can't think of it, something, but.
You seem like a priest who stays out of the liturgy wars and the goings on Catholic Twitter. Yeah. Has that been something you've intentionally done? Because I would imagine that every kind of Catholic parish isn't unaffected by these sorts of conversations and pressures, or is yours?
Yeah, my parish, to be honest, I feel largely we're just, for whatever reason, not kind of bogged into that. I think one of the gifts the Lord has given me is encouragement. I love encouraging people. So I feel like one of the ways the evil one works in my life is he tries to discourage me. Like, I give this talk at this conference in Steubenville, and I had some pretty serious spiritual warfare going on before my talk. Like, I was just like a lot of self-doubt and all that. And this happens before a lot of talks, well, you were saying before, like comparing and, all that kind of stuff. And yes, I just have to share, you and I and Trent were talking about giving a talk, and I'm like, I'm talking about something kind of scholarly and I don't feel that equipped. And Trent's like, I felt the same way, I just I give a talk about, like how atheists argue how Protestants argue like atheists. And I just wrote down a couple of notes from my book and I just had to give that talk. And then there's like a pause and I said, well, you did write a book on it. And he's like, I did write a book on it. I'm like, that's kind of preparing for a talk.
Yeah. Trent, you don't talk anymore. Matt, what do you got?
Exactly. And with it, I have a very fond memory of you and I. We were at a youth conference and we were at this coffee shop like 2 hours before one of our talks. I don't think either one of us was finished, just living our lives. And I just remember you thinking, I think you had the Sunday morning keynote.
Okay.
And you're like, I'm looking at the notes and I know what they want me to say. What you said, but I know it will connect. And I'm going to say what I know will connect. And then I'm going to try to like include this stuff.
Yeah.
But, and it was great. So trust your intuition.
I remember they asked me to give a talk on dating as a teenager. And I was up there and I was about to say the things they wanted me to say. And I just said, you really shouldn't be dating as teenagers. You'll just end up fornicating. Don't date until you're ready for marriage. It's stupid. I just said it. And they started cheering. And I'm like, you heard what I said, right? It was weird.
Wow. Well, people love honesty. Liturgy wars.
Yeah.
One of the gifts of the Lord has given me is encouragement. One of the ways the evil one works against me is discouragement. And so I just find it kind of discouraging. And this is something that I learned from Patrick Lencioni, but I don't know where it originally comes from. It's the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. You heard this?
Give it to us because it's so worth reiterating. So
everyone
please.
has a circle of influence. Everyone has a circle of concern. Everyone's circle of concern is bigger than the circle of influence. If you focus too much on your circle of concern, which are things outside of your control, your circle of influence shrinks. But if you focus on your circle of influence, which you actually have control over, your circle of influence grows.
I want you to say all this again. It's so good.
It's so true. I preach about this. I'm not kidding you. 3 to 4 times a year to my parish.
Feel free to let loose.
So
I'm going to go light up a cigar. Keep going.
Okay. So anyway.
I really want you to dive into this.
Yeah. And so I feel it's very easy just to be concerned about things and to worry and obsess about them that we have absolutely no control over. I remember during some sort of scandals about 5 years ago, I was doing something with Blessed is She, and I'm with all the writers, and somebody's asking about, what about this bishop, and he's doing this thing. And I was just trying to be honest, And I said, well, to be honest, I'm a priest in Phoenix. I have everything in my life that I need to become a saint. And I don't know whose job it is to correct that bishop, but it's not mine. And I said, so I don't know, other than prayer, what we're supposed to do about that. And later she said, I was actually really fraying. That's like, yeah, that's called reality. Like, I have no control over what that bishop's doing. And so I find when I read those things, I feel less empowered. I feel less encouraged. I feel less equipped or the desire to love and serve the people in my parish where I am, my circle of influence.
You kind of feel paralyzed, don't you?
Yeah, I'm going to die and I'm going to face Jesus. And he's going to, how did you form the people of St. Teresa Parish in
And he
Phoenix,
won't
Arizona?
say a thing about my character to you.
Yeah, anything.
That'll never come up.
What about the German bishops moving into, Lord, it's your church. It's your church. You know that famous John the 23rd thing? Before you go to bed at night, you say, well, Lord, it's your church. I'm going to bed. It's like, yeah, it's your church, Jesus. You built it. So, yeah, it's out of my control. And so I think there's a fair amount of us that we could be reminded of all the time. Like, friend, how is that helping you to become holy? Can I tell you something sneaky I did in my parish? I once started a homily, and I said, should President Joe Biden receive Holy Communion when he attends Mass?
You said that in a homily?
Yeah, and I'm like not a controversial preacher. I wouldn't say I talk about political things a lot. Anyway, we can talk about what I mean by that. And the whole parish was like, and then I said, I'm actually not going to answer that question. And I said, the bishops are talking about it right now. They're writing a document on Eucharistic coherence, and that's good. But I'd actually rather ask a more important question, which is, should you and I be receiving Holy Communion when we attend Mass? And then I just preached about the church, like what it means to be in a state of grace or state of mortal sin, and that we're actually doing more damage to ourselves. That you want to talk about weaponizing the Eucharist? It's receiving Holy Communion in a state of mortal sin. That's what the Bible calls weaponizing the Eucharist, is receiving Holy Communion unworthily. Paul says you eat and drink judgment upon yourself, which is why many of you are sick and dying. Whoo! That'll, yeeks. So, and I was like, I'd rather make us feel uncomfortable than somebody else. We feel better about ourselves because I'm not saying that question's not unimportant. The bishops are dealing with it. He has a bishop. That's their thing. Mm-hmm. I'd rather make us feel uncomfortable. Should we be receiving Holy Communion? And that's what I want to do. I want to help equip these people to love and follow Jesus. One of the things we say in seminary is preach to who's there. Preach to who's there. Imagine an audience that's somewhere. Maybe this will go viral. Maybe I should preach to some viral audience. I need to preach to these people in front of me. Do you know what I'm saying?
100%.
So that's why I find a lot of that, to be honest. It doesn't bear fruit in my life.
I love that. I love it. This advice is something we should all take to heart. But is it something you have to fight against, or is it just easy for you not to be concerned about ecclesial politics?
It's very easy.
Yeah.
I just don't care. I find it boring.
That's wonderful. Has it always been easy?
Oh, yeah.
There was never a point where you had to exert more effort to not care?
Yeah, I think I went to a seminary that wasn't a thing. I think when you're in seminary, that can be when you can start to build this culture of who these bishops and who's so-and-so. And I just didn't have that at my seminary. And then the rare times, it was very rare I'd hear a guy talk about it. I just found it profound. You don't know who any movie stars are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like that way in bishops. I know who my own bishop is. I know who the Pope is. I know two others. I just don't need to.
Yeah.
I just don't care.
Yeah.
And I love the church, but you know what I mean. I don't. Who's moving where?
What advice could you give that you think someone would actually hear who's involved heavily in ecclesial politics? There's advice you could give that they wouldn't hear, but is there something you could say in a way that even they or I or whoever's watching would hear?
I just ask my parishioners, how much are you watching the news or looking at these things? And they'll tell me 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours. Then I'll say, how much praying are you doing in a day? 7 minutes. Let's try to pull that one down about an hour. Let's try to pull this one up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like that joke by Brian Regan. The meme monster. Here. You see? I'm here.
You see the difference?
That's what my parishioners. Your prayer should be here, not here. Here. So, I think people get it pretty easily. I'm not saying being uninformed, but instead of 3 hours, how about 90 minutes? How about you try to pray the rosary every day? And actually pray for the church. Or pray for those people that you're so frustrated and angry at. That's actually what Jesus told us to do. I don't sound that patronizing, but do you know what I mean?
I do.
So I think it's addictive. That helps a lot.
I'm using the term colloquially, but that's what it is.
Yes.
Something about feeling angry equals productive. It feels like I'm being productive by getting angry.
Yes.
And it also it also kind of reminds me that I'm on the right side when I see that someone else isn't. Maybe there's that. So it kind of confirms me in my rightness, and anger feels productive. Something like that.
So I think, number one, anger can be addictive. And my bishop has this great line. He says, we need to be good stewards of our anger. And I think there's a rush you get from being angry. I can't believe that person's doing that. That person's destroying the church. And getting kind of exciting, click, 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 and shocking. And we all know how the internet works. The more you click on certain things, the internet's like studying you, and it gives you more of those stories. And so it becomes more narrow what you read. And so I think that's true. It can become addictive. And is that really helping you love the Lord? And so I think you're right. I think it would be for a lot of people to have to fast occasionally. I mean, you do that. Aren't you about to do that?
Yeah. We'll talk about that in the live stream. Though.
Yeah, but I just think that's so that's so good.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to tell you something off camera. I can't. This is so unhelpful to people watching. Like, why would you tell him that? But I have so many things about fasting. Ask me a question. Something my wife said to me. Keep going.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I think you're right. I think we need to be a good steward of our anger in that. And one last thing, I'll just say about the internet. As you know, they need clicks, because clicks is what gets people to come to your revenue streams. And so they've done studies where the content, the quality. Sorry, I'm not saying this about you, but
no, it is. Let me insert a quick anecdote, if I might. Someone said this about you, Neil. You heard Matt Bruinger. He's like, I kind of feel like your job, Matt, is like light a fire, because then what Neil does is he takes clips out of the main show and releases them, but he obviously releases them in a way that people want to click on them. So he's like, I feel like your job has to light a fire, and then Neil comes in with like a kerosene and just throws it. It's just like, yeah.
It's not a help. Yes.
It's all about getting the clicks, baby.
But so people write stories, and they've done studies where they don't spend as much time.
Don't stop, by the way. Keep throwing kerosene. In case you thought that was a rebuke. No, that's
that
you're meant to do that. Go.
Yeah, but that's just the nature of the internet. And so if anger is addictive, and shocking stories gets the clicks, that keeps people coming back, and it keeps the anger loop going. So again, we have anger. We are called to have righteous anger. If you see injustice and you're not angry, that's bad. So it's about being a good steward of your anger. But that would be my question is, what's the fruit it's really bearing in your life? And every person have to answer that individually. And absolutely for everyone, if they're feeling it's becoming too much, then it probably is, and they should do it less and pray more. And scene. Just clip right there, Neil.
Do you have opinions about priests with platforms? I always get worried when a priest has some kind of shtick, even if it comes from a great intention, and even a holy place. What do I know? I'm like, ugh, like the cooking priest, this priest, I don't know, like when there's a following that's kind of garnered around it. Like, I think if I were a bishop, I would tell all my priests, I don't want any of you on social media.
Really? Okay.
Maybe I don't mean that.
No.
Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying priests should get off social media. I'm not making that judgment, because much good is done on social media through very good and holy priests, and I'm not critiquing them. Well, let me just make it personal. Like, there's so many traps and pitfalls that await you on social media, that it might be better for you to be concerned about your parish and nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to be on social media, I'm on very, very little. I would do what you do. In other words, I want good things on the internet. I just don't have to deal with a lot of it. I wouldn't read a lot of the comments. I'd have somebody do that for me, or I would have somebody else have the passwords to my things.
Yeah.
Because I agree. I think I've seen in my own life priests who have a platform or get like famous, and it does not end well.
That's my thing, yeah.
But I delight, like in Father Mike Schmitz. I delight in Bishop Barron. So I think they're doing great things.
I do too.
I think they're preaching the gospel.
Can you hear me agreeing with you loudly enough? Because I'm so afraid people think I'm chiding them. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm glad Bishop Barron's doing what he's doing. I'm glad Father Schmitz is doing what he's doing.
I've met both of those men, and they're believers.
Yeah.
Like, they love the Lord. Yeah. They're believers. And I think the older I get, that's just one of the best compliments you can give about somebody is he's a believer.
Disciple.
Like, he knows the Lord. So I can't deny that. And I don't doubt that probably adds a level of temptation to their life. But if I had to be honest with you, I'm discerning this right now, to be honest, whether to go more into the internet. Part of me doesn't want to, but I wonder if it's really of the Lord. Like, I'm just kind of afraid of those things, but fear is not of God. And if I could be honest, I was on a retreat, like a silent retreat, and I had this amazing spiritual director, has crazy spiritual gifts. He knows nothing about me. And he's looking at me and he says, are you a preacher? Do people say like you're good at preaching? And I'm like, yeah, I get good feedback about that. He's like, yes, when I pray for you, I get a lot of Ezekiel, I think it's Ezekiel 34. He said the watchman, like the watchman on the wall. And of course, the scriptures say, like, God says, if there is an enemy coming in the watch, you warn them, the people, and they don't listen to you, that's on them. But if an enemy's coming, you don't warn the people, that's on you. So when he told me that, I was like, what should my voice be? And how am I called to be the watchman? Obviously, first and foremost with my own parish, but I was kind of praying and discerning that. But it kind of shifted the conversation from myself, like, what are the pros and cons of like priests get famous, and I've seen that kind of end poorly. My own vanity, is that good for me? Am I wasting time? And I gave up social media on Lent like years ago and really never went back, and overwhelmingly not missed it. But then it shifted to the paradigm of like, if the Lord's asking me to do something, I need to do that. Yeah. And for a long time, I thought, any video I can think about making, Father Mike Schmitz has already made it. So like, just, I can just like send you the link. Or Bishop Barron is
but you know the answer
super
to that.
Smart. But when I die, and the Lord asks me to give an account for my life, I can't be like, well, didn't Father Mike Schmitz, Bishop Barron? Like the Lord's like, I asked you to do this. So anyway, that's just something I'm discerning, and I'm trying to discern it well, and not kind of in that human. But I agree with everything you're saying. Those are real and need to be taken into account.
Maybe I'm worried about it because like when you have a family, like it's difficult to be a bad father and husband and keep the wheels on, because they'll fall off eventually. Your wife will hate you. Your children will, whatever. But if I'm a single person living a celibate life and I'm living poorly, the feedback doesn't necessarily need to be as imminent. I can distance myself from my parish. What do I know about being a parish priest? Forgive me for talking about things I know nothing about, but I just would imagine that it's easier to hide as a parish priest than it is as a married man or as a religious.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, every
Matt,
situation's different.
Left a little bit.
Sorry. Every situation's a little different.
A little more. Just
really?
Yeah, right there.
Have I been out of scene this
You've
entire
just been
time?
kind of shifting right a little
I think it's because I keep laughing.
Just out of center a little bit. Okay, sorry.
Thank you for telling me that. Yeah.
I think I think every situation is different, and I certainly think there are people in my parish who would tell me.
You don't want to make blanket statements like me? Women aren't funny. Priests shouldn't be on social media. You want to be nuanced?
My first tweet could be.
Well, they talk about for a monk to become a hermit, they have to be a monk for so long before they become like a hermit.
Okay.
Because whose feet will they wash, right? They need to be normal and serve others before they can graduate, as it were, to becoming a hermit. So maybe if I were a bishop, I'd do something like that. First 10 years of your priesthood, you can't be on social media. Maybe it'd be something like that, where it's like, just learn to love the people in your parish and grow in wisdom. And then you can, I don't know.
It's a conundrum, because I want Christ to be on the internet. People are on the internet. I think Bishop Barron's right when he says St. Paul would have like lost his mind. Like, this is the Areopagus. Like, this is where people gather and have conversation. I delight in what you do. I mean, to your credit, I remember being at a conference with you, and we were talking about something provocative. I can't remember what it was. And I said something, and you said, we got to be saying this stuff. And I said, you can't say that in public anymore. You're like, we need to be saying this stuff. And friend, you say this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's good stuff,
That's
I think
weird.
it needs to be
I'm always
said.
nervous when people tell me they watch my show. Like, I'm like, what did I say?
I feel
when people come up to me like, I listen to Pints with Aquinas, my first thought is I feel nervous. Almost like I had 8. Let's say
she's like, 8, I'm a comedian.
It'd be like if I had 8 beers at the party last night and I don't remember a lot of it, and you're like, hey, you were having some fun last night. I'm like, oh god, what did I do? That's how I feel when I meet people who watch my podcast.
I think I can relate in this way. Sometimes it's a little unsettling when you realize that people aren't listening to your preaching. But it's a lot more unsettling when you realize they are listening to it.
Yeah.
So sometimes people are like, oh, Father, I did this thing in my life. And you're like, why? And they're like, you preached about it 2 months ago. And I'm like,
I was just spitballing. You didn't know.
And you're like, oh, you were listening? And so that is, my sister told me once, I preached a homily about making a schedule. And a schedule is like an instantiation of a vision for life. Like, we should have a vision for life. And what a schedule is like, what kind of person do I want to be? And then I build a schedule that will make me into that person. And she told me that my niece went home. She's 11 and made a schedule for the next day. And she's like, you know, how close she paying attention? I was like, she did. And I was like,
people are listening.
Seriously. And I was like, oh man, the weight of preaching has only grown the longer I've been a priest. You know, I've been a priest 12 years now. So you think like, oh, the longer you're a priest, like, preaching, I like get it now. It just grows. And now that I'm a pastor, now that I know that I'm going to be held morally accountable for the formation of these people, and I have a role to play in their life, and I can't be their conscience, but I'm there to help form their conscience. That the weight of that is.
Did you hear what Scott said last night in his talk, quoting from Saul of the Apostolate?
No.
It was something to the effect of, if a priest is a saint, his people will be. You know this better than me. Maybe you should say it. Well, you don't. Okay. If a priest is a saint, his people will be fervent. Something like that. If a priest is fervent, his people will be decent. If a priest is decent, his people will be godless. Something to that effect.
Yes.
And probably the same thing is true as a father. Like I need to be a saint for my children and my wife. Not just like, dad doesn't lose it anymore. Oh, well done.
A lot of venial. But he's around.
Let me tell you.
Pretty good.
A lot of venial.
Yeah, that's that's definitely a temptation for all of us. When we're not doing what we should be, we look at priests can look at other priests and stops looking at Jesus, you know. Well, at least I'm better than Father, but you know, I'll have to stand.
As a parish priest, do you have a 5-year plan? Like, do you envision your life going a certain way as a priest? Like, as a married man, right? I'm like, I'd like to live here in Steubenville forever. You know, maybe we'll grow old here. Maybe the kids will live down the street. Maybe in the winters, since they're so brutal here, we might have to go down south for my wife's health. So maybe we'll have grandkids. Like, I kind of envision how it'll look. Do you envision how your life will look as a priest?
Well, So I'm at my home parish. So I became the pastor of my home parish about 2 years ago. And I feel like I'm going to be there a long time, but of course you have no control. I would say I find utter freedom in that. The fact that I don't have to decide, the fact that God's will sounds like my bishop's voice, that is so helpful. Like I know I'm going to be at St. Teresa's not a day longer or a day shorter than I'm supposed to be. Like I will get a phone call from the vicar for clergy. He will tell me what my next assignment is. I'll either die before then or I'll be going somewhere else. So that is, I find, actually utterly freeing. But a personality trait of mine is I just live in the moment. That's just the way God made me. So every assignment I've ever had, I'm like, I'm going to do this forever. I think that's the only way to live any assignment as a priest. You just assume I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life.
How would you pastor your church differently if you knew that you'd be there for the next 40 years? Like, you know, sometimes I wonder how priests feel about this because they're building this thing up. They have a direction for their parish and they might get moved the next year. Yeah,
I mean, there's a Latin adage, it's Festina, lente, make haste slowly. And I think it's good to have both. I think it's good to both simultaneously think I could be here for 20 years and I might get moved in a year. So I both have like an urgency for the gospel, but I also, I don't move too quickly. Like gotcha. I'm really trying to build something well and very intentional. So I hope I'm there for a long time because I've asked priests, like, when did it feel like your parish? You know, like I've been there for 12 years. When did it feel like you were the father of this community? And I get different answers, you know, but some priests have said like 5 years. It took 5 years before I really felt like they really knew me and I really knew them and they knew my heart and we could really start to move. And some guys it's shorter. So anyway, I think it's good to have both, you know? Like the Lord could come back tomorrow or...
and I guess you don't want to be so indispensable that if you move, the parish falls apart.
Yeah. I mean, I would think that was kind of bad leadership, to be honest.
Yeah.
So if everything falls apart when you leave, that's probably...
You didn't do a good enough job.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm really pointing people back to the sacraments, to the Eucharist, to confession, to the teaching of the faith, well, then those things keep going. Are they falling in love with Jesus or me, you know? And of course, you know, I have a personality and my personality is supposed to be a bridge, not an obstacle to Christ, as John Paul II says. So that's all real and beautiful and we need love to be mediated through the incarnational realities. But having said all of that, my desire is to, like at the Mass, to lead them to the Lord. So if you like leave your parish and like half your parish goes with you, I'd be like heartbroken. It's like, friends, did I misform you? God's going to take care of you. You know, he's your father, you know? So.
Father John Parks, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cut!